Soldier of light on social media.
This is an awakening.
Snap out of it!
The Light Dome.
Yes, indeed. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, this is your brother, Abdul Wadud, aka Quest Man, coming at you live. I just want to make sure that anybody that's here that can hear me, if you're able to hear me, just put a 1 in the chat so I know you can hear my voice pretty good. I'd like to begin by greeting all the viewers and those coming in and those to come in soon. Hotep, salam alaikum, peace be with you, shalom. For me, all the formulas apply to my kindred, to my brothers and sisters watching and viewing. All this for the people, all this for those who believe in the pursuit of knowledge, who believe in the pursuit of unity, and believe that in all of this, when we come together, more enlightened, more informed, enhanced intelligence, that we can do better for each other. So today or tonight, depending on what time it is for you, where you are, I wanted to present to you a special live. This one, I hope to, we have invited a dear brother who I have a great deal of respect for. Some of you may be aware of the brother, some of you may not. I'll present a clip to you here real quick, and that way you'll get an idea to refresh your mind. But I would say that if I had a term to use, I would describe the brother as a young historian, a young scholar of our day. And I say that because I think sometimes we forget what it means to be a scholar, what it means to be people of knowledge. We've been so used to looking up to other people from other cultures and customs and ethnicities, that we forget to admire and appreciate the scholarship from our own people. So, this for me, this is an honor to be able to have a scholar of our day, and not just any scholar of our day, student of knowledge, but someone who appreciates those who came before us, that have preceded him in his own pursuits of knowledge. So, to give you a bit of an idea, let me put a clip to kind of show you how I learned about this brother. I'm a type of brother. I like to learn. I like to what I want to say, build, and I like to see when people are building on things that matter to us. You understand? Things that when we are properly informed, as they say, better, you do better. So let me share this clip. Just to give you an idea, this clip, the brother was dealing with Reconstruction, right? That's when you take something, like something that, like an artifact or a mummy or skeletal remains or whatnot, and your objective is to try to create what they would have looked like if they were present. That's kind of the idea that I get from Reconstruction. But of course, I imagine the brother will be able to break that down better than I. But I want to present to you a clip of something that you might have come across, like I have, that the brother So I hope you will be able to hear the sound. Here he's talking about the reconstruction of King T. I might be pronouncing it wrong. I've heard some say Thai. I've heard some say T. But we'll let the professionals, bring that to us here shortly. So let me play this.
The existing bust of Queen T is probably one of the most lifelike, and it's probably one of my favorite portraits of an ancient Egyptian monarch. It's so lifelike and it's so vibrant, and to be honest with you, it doesn't even really require a reconstruction. That's how good it is. But unfortunately, we don't live in a straightforward world. Just like I did with my other reconstructions of Tutankhamun that you may or may not have seen already, the approach was the same. I wanted to recreate the bust, and then the ultimate litmus test for me was to see if this overlaid well with the mummy, so that I could confirm actually this is what she looked like. Because to me, that is going to be the barometer. Was this a piece of stylistic art? If the features all line up and everything looks copacetic, for want of a better word, then we can essentially say that this is what Queen T looked like. So anyway, without further ado, I've been talking and rambling on for a little while now. Here is the bust of Queen T that I have created. As you can see, I haven't tried to change anything. I've preserved every single feature. So you'll see the width of the nose, the width of the lips, even that very famous, downturn of our outer lips, that kind of very stern, strong expression that is very, very becoming of a ruler like Queen T.
Okay, so I wanted to share that little clip with just to give you a little thumbnail sketch of some of the work that the brother has put forth. I think that one might have been about a year ago. Yeah, about a year ago. And since then, the brother's been going hard on the job. So let us do something here. Be sure to invite and share this live. I think it would definitely benefit the community. Be sure to like. Be sure to do all the little formalities as you come in, and let's pretty much get straight to what we've got going on here. And also, give me a second here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put this little this at the bottom of the screen here, so you can show your support to the platform. And we're going to invite the brother on in. Let's see here. Make sure I've got that there, that there. All right. Okay. Peace and blessings, dear brother. I want to make sure you can hear my voice pretty good. Welcome.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed. I can definitely hear you.
Brilliant.
I definitely am honored. It's been a while, and I've actually had a mind of doing this for quite some time. And, sometimes it's hard to, contact or communicate, and everybody's, on the internet, it's kind of, how can I put it? When you're a stranger, like I'm a stranger, so to speak, communicating with a brother that's literally over the ocean, it's a challenge because, who is this brother? Who's emailing me? Who's messaging me? But I definitely appreciate you taking the time out, to break bread with your brother Questman and our community. Most of my viewers will probably see this after the live is all done. I imagine because our time right now is 5:16. They're probably still at work. Many people are still at work over here. So they'll get the benefit with this later on. I'm sure they will definitely appreciate this. And peace and blessings, dear sisters in the chat. Yeah, it has been some time. Those who know me know that I move with inspiration. Like I'm not like, I do my lives and things like that, but I do it, I just like sporadic. Like, there's an idea. Let's do it. Something like that. So to begin with, who or what is the King's Monologue?
And that's a great question. First of all, thank you for letting me on the show. Right, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be here. And it was actually quite funny watching back that I call it old footage now. Obviously, to other people, it's kind of like brand new. To me, it's like old footage because it almost feels like it was a lifetime ago, and it was only just like it was about a year and a half ago that I made that video now.
Yeah, it
But
does
so
seem
much
like a while. Yeah,
it does, because so much has transpired in terms of everything from the research that I'm doing to the content to the progress that's been made. So yeah, it feels like it's a lifetime ago. But yeah, so who's the King's Monologue? Well, the King's Monologue, I guess the best way to describe King's Monologue is just to think of it as a independent research network. That's what it is. That's, I guess, the vision. That's what it is, and that's what I want it to grow into.
okay.
At the moment, it's just me, but in the future, my vision is for it to be a much broader network, reaching out to different media platforms, branching from Africa to different parts of the diaspora, where people can access unapologetic Black history. And I say that deliberately. I say Black history as opposed to African history, because I believe that Black history is not limited to the confines of Africa, although Africa is very important. Black history certainly is not limited to that geographic region. So yeah, I think the King's Monologue was, when I set the channel up, it was, I guess, just my response to take, I've been a researcher now for several years, a couple of decades. I've got a relatively big library that I read, and I just knew that I had something to offer our community in terms of history. So I wanted to put that together with my skills that I've managed to gather in the field of kind of media, digital media. I've spent a few years, developing those skills in different areas of work, leisure, and business. And I want to just put it all together and provide a platform to release our history, because no one else is going to do it if we don't. Basically.
Let me ask you, okay, so now I've been watching, the presentations you've been doing for quite some time, and I've noticed, both the positive effects, the strong positive effects, and I've also noticed the those who would be you would say are your critics. You understand, who've kicked back, and I want to know, when you started doing like some of your work at the earlier stages, right? Were you expecting or anticipating like it affecting people in the way that it has? And both, I'm talking about both the people who were heavily impressed and appreciated the work put forth, and also those who were like touched, who felt like, oh, who does this guy think he is? And and it came with their 2 cents. And I'll give you. Well, first of all, tell me how you felt about that, or did you expect that to happen?
Oh, I absolutely expected it. It's no surprise whatsoever. I grew up in England, as you could tell by the accent, probably. Yes. And one thing that growing up in this nation has taught me to deal with is the passive aggressiveness of basically a racist society. So how to get away with racism. In America, you're not so good at getting away with racism. America kind of wear it on their sleeve.
Yes.
So
exactly.
They don't really get away with it. Everyone sees it and they kind of like, they own it. Whereas England is much more passive aggressive, where they'll get away with racism. They can be like openly racist, but then always have plausible deniability because they haven't called you the N-word, or they haven't, so said they're doing something because you're Black. Yeah, exactly. But the nation, I'm not going to say they all because that'd be unfair, but I'd say the nation as an infrastructure harbors this deep-seated dislike for melanated people, for Black people.
Yes.
And so I've dealt with that my entire life, that kind of passive-aggressive nature. So dealing with it online is light work. To be honest with you, I don't know if you've seen me, what I'm like in the comments, or sometimes even when I'm doing live streams and stuff. I actually quite relish the antagonism. I like showing those kind of people that their opinion means very little to me, because actually that's what hurts them more than anything. What they expect is they expect to pull up and then say, hey, look, you know, melanated
Yep.
folk, I've arrived, roll out the red carpet.
Tuck your
You know,
tail.
even sometimes when they pass a compliment, they're expecting to be given red carpet treatment.
Right.
And you know, I
Like
don't, you know,
I'm here. I'm qualified. I have the
yeah,
credentials of
yeah,
A, B, and
yeah, yeah.
C.
This is
So you listen to me.
exactly. And they don't even, and they, a lot of the time they don't even have any qualifications. But it's the case of them, you know, pulling up and going, you know, this is really good, but have you considered this? And I'm like, you know, my kind of thing is just to totally ignore them, and they really hate that, or to just use my classic British wit and sarcasm to dress them down and make them feel very small, because this isn't their, you know, this isn't their playground.
Right.
Don't play around with our history, don't play around. This is something we take very seriously, and one of the things that I demand is that you respect us, you respect our history. We know who we are. We're not going to acquiesce to you. We're not going to make ourselves second best to you. We're not going to make out like we need your platitudes and your, you know, your acceptance before we take it seriously. It's like they feel like unless they place their stamp or their certificate upon what we're doing, then it's illegitimate. I like to show them that actually your opinion is irrelevant to me. I don't care if you like what I'm doing or not.
Yes.
I'm going to do it regardless.
That's definitely a very strong position. And the thing is, see here in the case of the U.S., in comparison, I would say we have two bodies of types of quote unquote, you know, the R word, the races. I'm gonna say it that way. And it's on one side you have the open, direct, blatant ones that will tell you, you know, out their mouth and demonstrate it with no shame. Then you have those people who will hide behind, almost like what you said, the use of certain words and certain language, and demonstrate it. They will even shake your hand and be nice and smile and pat you on the back and everything. But all the while, there's the underhand that there's an underhandedness. So you've got those two groups here, and they're even shown in the political establishment.
Yeah, you call. I was about to say you call them the Republicans and the Democrats, don't you? It just
Right.
sounds like you're describing.
Exactly. So what's happening today in the States is many people, and when I'm talking about people, I'm talking about what's concerned with me, and that's the family. You know, you understand? I'm not saying that to exclude anybody, but I'm saying that for me, you know, my first concern, my primary objective when I get up in the morning is how's the wife and kids, how's the family, how's the neighbor, then how's the people in the next block, you know, something like that. Then how's the city? Expand it like that. So I'm saying this, that we are in a day and age where I feel that we are determined to say, look, we can think. We're not whatever those old school days you used to think that we were like equivalent to monkeys and apes and all these things you brought us down to. That's not us. And you've known that. And this is the reason why you continue to conceal, cover, alter, whitewash, and all these things, knowledge. Because you know what we actually are, who we really are, versus, you know, what you like us to be painted as, or what you like us to think ourselves to be. So I think that in today's time and age, there's a challenging rise of interest. It may be an aspect of unity. I don't say it's quite unity yet. There's a spirit. There's a soulful connection that many people are doing. It's there is a maybe it's even psychological that we are insisting, like, look, you know, we're not we're not the people you enslaved. You understand? We, you know, remember them. We sympathize with the plight of our ancestors, but there aren't any chains on us, and we're not going to allow you to put them on us. And the last we checked, I can think, and not only can I think, but I can reason. I can you know, I often wonder, real quick, before I go on, if Africa, for example, had not been colonized, if many of the countries where melanated people reside had not been colonized, what would our evolution have looked like? You understand? Like, you know, a lot of things that we see in the world are are alterations of what our ancestors established, altered or whitewashed by the invasive powers that be. But I wondered if we were left alone, what would it have looked like? Now, because I know you want to say something, but me being, I'm sort of a spiritual person, not sort of, but I am, and I do have a sort of a code to that where I believe that things happen for a reason. That there is what I want to say, not in a blind sense, that things cause and effect. That what we have today is the outcome of what came before us, but we can use what we have today and the knowledge of that to build what we want to establish tomorrow. I often tell brothers and sisters, when you have your child, raise your hero, raise your solution. Whatever problem you're complaining about in your day and age, come together and raise your solution. You understand? Many of the people who've lost their lives, young people, I say, well, that was your doctor right there. That was your inventor right there. That was your whatever that would have been a possible solution to whatever ails us today. This brings me to some terms that are used. Now, I described you earlier. I used the term Reconstructionist. Is that a rightful application? Is that a rightful label?
I would say Reconstruction artist. And I actually do press that quite heavily on my channel to my community, that Reconstruction is not a science, it's an art. And I do push that. One of the first things that I did when I got into this field was to really try to understand it as a field, not just to kind of, it's one thing for me to kind of go on, take some, obviously my approach is completely different because I take priority of the artwork as opposed to trying to make a face out of a cadaver, which is what a forensic facial reconstruction artist does. But I wanted to understand the field as a whole, because I can't provide a alternative or critique to something that I haven't taken the time to really study and to understand. So I've spent a long time understanding the field. And one of the things about this field is that it's 100% an art masquerading as a science.
Yes.
And obviously the difference between an art, unstrictly speaking, the difference between an art and a science is that, a science should be objective, i.e. it doesn't matter who does it, they should all come out with the same solution. So maths is a science. It doesn't matter who you give the sum. You could give the sum to someone in Africa and someone in Europe. They should come out with.
Here comes the interference with the network.
What happened there? I lost the stream there. I don't know if that was my
That's what I said. Here comes the interference with the network. They want to bother us now. We're this is what happens.
Yeah. So what I was saying was so science should be objective, i.e. should come up with the same outcome every time. But then an art is something where it's subjective. So people come up with different solutions, and it doesn't necessarily mean one's wrong or one's correct. So if you have your bachelor's, you can have a bachelor's in a science or a bachelor's in an art. And forensic facial reconstruction is an art.
Science is more etched in stone, like there are concrete rules that have to be obeyed for any application of it. Whereas in art, you can let the heart just fly where it wills.
Absolutely. There's any number. So there's scientific aspects to it, but there's any number of variables. And one of the things I try to do is expose these variables. So I've done a couple of papers now where I've talked quite extensively about the reconstruction process. I've critiqued it because they sell it to the public as though it's this science. Oh, we've got the skull and this is what his face looks like. That is absolute nonsense. That is, they don't even stand by that in the papers that they have developed, and I've critiqued, I had my very public debate / spat with Cesare Marias, who's probably the leading Egyptologist right now, and he's still every time I post a video will make a comment and say, is this about me? So he's steady fanboying the work that I do. Carolyn Wilkinson, obviously Zai Hawass and the various reconstructions that he's put forward, Elizabeth Darnes. I've looked into all of their work. I've read all of their work, and they, none of them, if they were put to the sword, or put in a situation where they had to stand by it in a principled way, would ever turn around and say this is an exact science. It's so far from an exact science. It's incredibly subjective, and it can be changed by, first of all, the number one thing that changes the outcome is the decision that is made about ethnicity, which is always made at the start. And that has to be made at the start, because you can't apply tissue onto the cadaver or onto the skull without first deciding the ethnicity, because between ethnicities there's such a difference in the way tissue expresses itself that has to be decided first. So yeah, the long story short is, if they decide the ethnicity at the start of the reconstruction, there's already a 100% chance that it's going to either look or not look black or white. That's already been decided. So it's not going to suddenly look black after they've decided it's supposed to look like an Egyptian.
What would you say? Okay, so I'm digesting here. DNA, right? Because in one case where you're talking about the ethnicity being identified. What would you say is the difference between ethnicity and race?
Okay, very good question. All right, so race is political. Okay, ethnicity is essentially parentage. So that's basically what your two differences are. So when you're talking about race, you're really talking about a coalition, a political kind of amalgamation of various things. These things are phenotype, which is essentially the way someone looks, ethnicity, which is where someone's kind of parentage comes from, complexion, which sometimes doesn't determine race. Ironically, as we know, because we got plenty of black people that are much lighter than Asians and even some Southern Europeans, but they're still classified as black. And geography. So those are kind of like the four things that come together, and they have to look at all four of those things before they decide what race someone's going to be.
Okay.
Which is really, so it's really weird, because you've got this thing that's supposed to be very simple, but once again, race is not simple at all. It's incredibly political.
Then, okay, in that case, let's say, because then how does the question, I guess, would be, and I'm gonna tie something to that, DNA. How does DNA apply to this idea? Apply to both the concept of ethnicity, the concept of race. So for example, you find some bones, you're just walking, taking a jog one day, like, oh, here's some bones. And the objective is to identify who these bones, what kind of a person these bones had belonged to. And of course, someone will say, well, you'll take their DNA, but will the DNA by default, will that reveal the race and ethnicity because of the DNA? Is that like a set in stone thing?
Yeah. See, this is where it's very loaded. Okay, so DNA, first of all, is not Boolean. It's not binary. Okay, so a lot of people think, oh yeah, we have DNA. Well, it's like, first of all, what type of DNA do you have? Because first of all, you have uniparental markers, which is like your Y DNA or your mitochondrial DNA. And those are just single line ancestry that will tell you a little bit about where your ancestors possibly may have moved, although it doesn't tell you even that much about that, and nothing else. It doesn't carry enough data to analyze what your ethnicity is. You couldn't even guess someone's race by their Y DNA marker, because it's, your Y DNA is your father's father, father, that single line. And then your mitochondrial DNA is your mother's mother, going up that single line. But obviously there's like almost an infinite amount of relatives you have in between.
You can have a father.
Yeah.
You could have a father in your line who was Chinese,
Mm.
but you wouldn't know that he was actually Chinese just by looking at the DNA itself.
Absolutely. You could have your great grandfather, my
Yokozuna
great
or
grandfather could be Chinese, both of us, because that's how quick race can be erased. You know, you're I think it's the estimate is you could essentially lose one of your grandparents the way
I
DNA
saw.
works.
I
So
wish I,
you know,
I wish I would have had this set aside. I saw some time ago a clip of a European scholar. Maybe I think he might have been German, and he was showing like a procedure that would take place over the course of time, where they took young African children from like maybe South Africa, I think it was. You might have to look this up. You can look at this; it's somewhere there. And they started. The objective was he was talking about how you start to breed over generations these children with Germans, and then over the course of time, uh, the child that you would see was someone to look more German than South African. That's what he was trying to describe. He was, and it was basically going over the process of elimination of certain. You mentioned the term phenotypes or certain genes. You understand? And I'm thinking to myself, like, well, wouldn't that child still, in effect, be South or ethnic South African?
well,
I mean, let's say if the
this is
father
just it.
was
This is
like,
where it gets
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this is just it. This is where I mean, this is where it gets incredibly loaded because
Yeah,
how are you determining race? So like I said, you got your uniparental markers which carry very little of your actual genetic data, but they just happen to preserve that single line, which can be useful. And a lot of times, by the way, genetics is just a database activity. That's all it is. A lot of people don't
yes,
realize this. They think it's something much more deep, and it's not just a database activity where they're trying to find these patterns. And a lot of times they can't find patterns, so they then rely on anthropologists. And what anthropologists do is tell them, well, this is history as it's being taught currently, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where they find the patterns to fulfill the narrative, but it doesn't necessarily say that. And then obviously you have autosomal DNA, which is your complete genome, which can tell you a lot more about your ancestry, but it doesn't go back very far. So all they can do with autosomal DNA is tell you who currently living has similar DNA to your own. And there's a process called STR profiling, which is very useful for finding not only your actual current relatives, but also people around the world who have similar genetic signature to you, where it's likely you come from a similar kind of, you have quite a similar makeup or similar biology. So that can be quite useful when it comes to determining phenotype. But that is rarely referenced when it comes to cases of anthropology. A lot of the time they rely on these Y DNA and mitochondria DNA markers to tell the human story. But
so
going back to your initial question, just really, really quickly, go back to your initial
yeah.
question regarding race. There are only a few markers that actually affect things that we classify as race, at least as they've identified now. So, for instance, in Europe, they've only got, I think, 4 markers that affect light skin. So there's four markers that are responsible for light skin in Europe. Those are like your SLC245A, your SLC45A2, your MC1R, and I think there's another one, I can't remember what the name of it is. But then in Africa, we've got like about 100 genes that determine skin complexion in Africa.
Yes.
So they've managed to map these different genes out. This is how they figured out that Cheddar Man was a very, very, very black man because he didn't possess any of the, and that's the interesting thing. When they look for mutations in terms of complexion, they only look for genes that make the skin lighter, because by default, Homo sapiens sapien is jet black. And that's one thing they won't tell you. So there's no genes out there that make you black. The only way that you come out really, 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 really black is you lack the genes that turn you white. Those are mutations. So it's mutations that turn you lighter. Yeah. When none of those mutations that turn you light exist, then you will be default Homo sapiens sapien, which is a jet black man.
Yes.
but they don't tell you that.
So with that in mind, I wrote a small book, and basically the essence of the book was about an apple. And I use this allegory a lot when I talk to some people about certain things. I take an apple, let's say it's growing in Zimbabwe, or well, okay, let's say it's growing in Sierra Leone. In my case, it's growing in Sierra Leone. Some wicked bandits snatch it, take it across the river, and plant it on the other side of the river. What grows out of there? What grows out of the seeds? What's the result? Will it be an orange tree? It'll be an apple tree, right? So I guess what I will get at to be more, I guess,
Yeah, I know
somewhat
where you're going with
scientific is the like fundamental genes that that particular life form started with. Wouldn't that remain through and through and through every generation, no matter what? Wouldn't the genes that started with the original plant, the original apple tree? Now it may become you got the Red Washington, you've got the Johnny Smith, you got all these other kinds of apples, but they're all in effect still qualifying as apples and not oranges, no matter
of course.
what variation. Now,
Yeah.
why am I saying that? I remember a study that they were looking at regarding the so-called Neanderthal genetics, right? And they were noting how nobody in the majority of Africa possesses the genes that are associated with the Neanderthal genetics. However, majority of the people who have been called Caucasian or Westerners or white do have this genetics, and like a small portion in the north part of Africa have the Neanderthal genetics.
Yeah.
Would you say that is similar to the scenario I just gave about the apple?
Yeah. I mean, so the way I interpret that is that default Homo sapien is absolutely a dark-skinned black man, and there's no argument about this.
Yes.
That dark-skinned black man might have several iterations in terms of their appearance on the African continent. If they're a Highlander, i.e. someone from the kind of Ephratic region of East Africa, they tend to have a more narrow nasal passage than those on the tropical regions of West Africa across the Sahel, who tend to have a broader nasal passage. But they are both equally black men, very, very dark skin. I'm talking about default Homo sapien.
They still
And
contain
then
that
even
original,
exactly. And then even on the African continent, prior to leaving, we began to develop different genes for our different varying complexions, remaining melanated, by the way, but with various complexions on the African continent. And then we leave the African continent and start to inhabit the rest of the world. And the way Western history works, the way Eurocentric history works, is the moment the black man left the African continent, he turned white. But that's just not supported. It's not supported genetically. It's not supported historically. When black people left the African continent, they remained black for for almost the entire time. And for everything we know about modern genetics, one thing that it has told us is that those genes that affect, light skinned Europeans are all very recent. They're all very recent. I mean, if you go back 7,000 years, everyone's black according to genetics. So
I've heard you mention, some of your observations of like you were able to identify like traits that were predominantly found in like one particular region, like let's say Sudan or Ethiopia, and there's like certain features that are like very common depending upon the region. Now, of course, being humans, we move around, we travel, we go here, we go there, but like I saw this picture right here. I saw a different one earlier, but this is the one I have right now. It was just kind of depicting something of what we're talking about. It's not my picture, but just showing that and you had a very nice one that was showing like the different head structures and whatnot. different groups, but they were all still, you know, ethnic African,
Yeah.
right?
See, I
And
would say this image, this is more an expression of political blackness as opposed to, you know,
explain
indigenous
that. Break that
blackness.
down. I'm glad you
Well,
mentioned
I
that.
would say I'd say a lot of people in those images are mixed, and they're visibly mixed. And this is not a criticism, because obviously, you know, that's the way that we know a lot of people are mixed now. Most people carry
Yes.
some kind of mixture, particularly if they've had, you know, any prolonged exposure to Europe or any of those continents. But I would say that there is a specific variation. Once again, going back to your original point about these, you know, Africans who don't carry any Neanderthal ancestry. That
Yes.
essentially means these are Africans who have remained, you know, unmixed in terms of
Mm,
Europeans and Eurasian ancestry, not
okay.
necessarily other Africans and other melanated people, but particularly Europe people of Eurasian ancestry. These are people, so you'll find them and they'll come in various complexions. Some of them will be as light as some of the people you've shown in the image there, but they do have a distinctive African phenotype. And I think it's just one of those things you have to be familiar with to appreciate. I mean, like for instance, the San is, you know, Khoisan people is a perfect example, which I'm sure you've heard of. You know, they are your hunter gatherers in southern Africa. They are pure unmixed Africans, you know, but some of
Yes.
them are, you know, as light as many of those people that you just showed in that image there, but they have that Khoisan phenotype. You know, it's distinctively African. So there is variance, but I guess what I would say is it's still noticeable, the indigenous African variance as opposed to the variance that's come as a result of mixture with Eurasian types. At
Yes.
least it's noticeable to me. I don't think it's noticeable to all, but it's noticeable to me. And then a lot of other Africans will be able to notice that.
I am going to let's see. I'm trying to find it here. I'm going to give you like a bit of a challenge of a sort.
Oh dear.
And
Now I'm nervous.
I want to find it first, so you got a little bit of time to breathe.
Yeah,
Um,
man.
because I want to see, because you're real
So
good
cringy.
at identifying certain features and things. So I'm curious about something, and when my curiosity strikes, I have to respond. Let's see here. Can I find it fast enough? Is the question. No, not there.
I feel
Okay,
like I'm
so
being
what
set
I'm
up at
going
the moment.
I'm going to show you um, a picture of the sweetest little girl in the world, and that's, let's see if I can show you the sweetest little girl in the world, who happens to be my own dear daughter. And I wanted to see if you could identify, because the reason why I'm doing this is because
Yeah.
um, you know, my spousal relations have been predominantly African. Like my wife now is Timni. You understand? People of Sierra Leone.
Okay.
The mother of my daughter is Soninke, right? So I want to see something here. What you see? Let's see. Did I do right here? Boom. So right here, this is my daughter Jawaria.
Okay.
What phenotypes stand out, and what can you say about those phenotypes?
Oh man, that's a that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, if you was to say off the rip, what does she look like to you? And obviously you've already told me that she's mixed, so I'm gonna guess incorrectly. But
Yeah.
I would say, you know, Fuller definitely jumps out to me. She could easily pass for a Fulani girl.
Mm,
She could also quite easily pass for a Nubian, you know.
okay. That's heavy, right? That's the
So
heavy part.
yeah, I feel like there's a real Sahelian, even over quite that band of the Sahel right across to the Horn. I feel like anywhere along there you could take this phenotype and it would
Yeah.
It would look right.
That's I like that. The reason why I like that is, see,
Yeah.
I know that the Fula people, and if I remember historically, the Soninke people and the Fula people used to like, travel amongst each other, like at
Oh
one
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So that would make sense. You got the Mali region, and even, I tell people oftentimes, I said, look, people tend to be more related to each other. When I'm talking about us, amongst us, more related than they realize. And a lot of times the conflict be something other than their relations. Like in the case of the Timne, which I have Timne ethnicity through my mother's side, right? And as I said, my wife is Timne. And they migrated at one time from Mali, from ancient Mali. Like at one time they were in effect Malian in all sense of the term, to my understanding. So that means to me that in that region, these are all West African countries. In that region, at some point, the only thing that would have been able to like really identify them, it would have been like them saying, well, we're this tribe or we're that tribe, or we're from the region over there on the other side of the Great Hill, and you guys live by the river. Because there wouldn't. It's like, would I be right in saying that the concept of racism, for all the sense of what that word means, was foreign to the motherland of Africa prior towards colonization?
Absolutely.
And I'll back it up even further. Prior towards, because you have like the Popol Bull that was given, and that had effects of racism in it. And you've had, I still would say it would be a colonial effect. Because prior to that, nobody was talking about. Because I'm thinking about the Arabs when they were invading, like the Fatimids when they came to Egypt, which at that time would have been called. I'm not sure what term the name they would have called, because you had oh man, I think, was Alexandria still going on during that time when the Fatimids came? Because then when they came, there was a capital called Al-Qahira. Al-Qahira, right? But anyway, my point is I was just trying to think about like the mentality of racism and how long it's been alive.
Yeah.
And it really isn't that long when you think about humanity as a whole.
I don't think racism is old at all. And I think sometimes people, one thing that everyone is guilty of, and we do this every day because it's a default of the way that our minds operate, is presentism, where we constantly apply what's happening currently to the past. It's the only way that we can have that we can gauge and we can understand. The first thing we do is we try and put ourselves, it's something we do on a subconscious level. But if you look historically, I think there's very little evidence for racism, even in places where people really think that racism exists quite strongly. Maybe in a text or something, and it's not actually racism that they're hearing. What they're hearing is maybe national pride, or maybe what they're hearing is some kind of. Sometimes you had kind of like it'll be like a degrading phenotypic kind of like, oh, I haven't seen this kind of person before. Or sometimes even an entire population of people can be viewed as barbarians. But none of those things there are as simplistic as racism is. Racism is a very new construct, and it was a very deliberate construct as well. It did have a purpose.
I think that racism only exists primarily. I'm not saying it doesn't exist in some other locations out of what I'm saying, but I think it's more where it's able to be financed. Where there's money in it, where there's money in being racist, because most people that are, working a 9 to 5, going to, nobody's even thinking about that outside of that fold unless it's able to be propagated there in a way. And in order for something to be propagated, it's like a church. You've got to finance a church for a church to be there. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. If there's no community support, you're not going to have whatever that church's beliefs are, or mosque or whatever. So I would say I'm suggesting that racism on the front screen, it exists where it's able to be financed, and then you have to ask, well, why is it able to be financed here? Like who's gaining from this? Who's benefiting from this existing here?
I think it's good that you mentioned financing, because when you follow the paper trail, you will get the answer. You know what? It's one of the biggest questions I asked for so long is, you know, why does racism exist? You know, if after discovering it's a new thing, you know, you start to look for the motive. And I think the clearest answer I got to that question is that racism happened as a result of a very fast expansion of a very small tribe of people who quickly found themselves first in power of Europe and then of the known world, essentially. They expanded very quickly. As a result of their very fast expansion, racism became a necessity in order for them to maintain power. So that's one of the things it kind of went hand in hand with the system of capital that was put in place, and it became a necessity. They had to create a society and turn what was the norm, the kind of status quo, which was these people, these melanated people are the majority. These melanated people are the ones in power. These melanated people have all of the traditions, all of the belief systems, everything places these melanated people at the top of this society. So therefore we have to uninform them about that structure, and we have to turn that structure on its head to make ourselves the default person in charge. So it was almost like a necessity, because it's either you accept the fact that you're not going to hold on to power for very long, or you fabricate a new history for everyone to follow. Because the old history, the traditional history, the ancient model, as Martin Bernal called it, told a very different story. But with that story continually being told, it was always going to be inevitable that this very fast expansion was going to come to a very quick end. So that's always that's what the conclusion to my research has been, to this kind of place where racism was a necessary construct to create in order to maintain what was a very rapidly growing empire, because that's exactly what it is, really, isn't it?
Man, I'm just thinking about the history of like when the dynamic of Western Europe shifted. To me, it goes back to like the Ottoman Empire, when, for whatever reason, the establishment decided not to continue pushing west. It could be said then, in that case, that if they would have just say, "Hey, let's just keep on going west. We're already at it. Why not? Let's just keep on going west." Then I wonder how the dynamics would have been. But I will say this, because as I said, I'm a spiritual person, and I tend to believe in like the idea of that, and this isn't in some kind of like a imbecile kind of way, or like some type of mindless way, because I believe in the tools of science. I believe in the tools of metaphysics, and so I don't think that I mean, while we can hope, I think the hope has to be backed by being properly informed and properly equipped. So I'm saying that everything happens for a reason, and this, in effect, you could, as a religious person might say, has been written. But in the same token, if I can say that this has been written, meaning this was inevitable, it was going to happen this way. But because we're not mindless entities, I believe that with the proper research, with the proper knowledge, and not just that alone, but with the proper economic grip, like gripping economic power source, we would be able to break out of this. I see that there's a shift of power happening even now as we speak in this day and age. There's a major collapse impending right now, and it's just it's starting to unwire and unfold at a rapid pace. I mean, faster in a short period of time than I ever thought. Like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, things seem to go on at turtle snail speed. Like this system just changed, and it took so many years. But now it's like bodies of power are tussling in a way where, you know, what we see today as prominent, strong, and bold may quickly change tomorrow. So, and I'm saying that because I believe that as a people, an opportunity is presenting itself to really grab a hold of true forms of empowerment, where not only will we be able to break free from the things that hold us down and hold us back, but we will be able to embrace true self-determination, true ideals for ourselves, so that even these things will start where, you know, as I said to one person, we need to canonize the research that our scholars make. I should be able to walk into a library in Namibia, if you know, and see your work saved, you know, archived there, because we have learned to appreciate what we put forth. Now I wanted to shift this just a minute. There are some terms that are, you know, going back into the study of, like, when we talk about Kemet, things like that. There are terms that are that I hear, and I like to be able to have a distinction of these terms: Afrocentrist, Eurocentrist, Egyptologist. What's the deal with these?
All right, so I'll go in order then. I think Afrocentrist is, if I was to take the definition given by Joseph Ben Jochannan, and that's just someone who approaches history with an African-centered perspective. So it's essentially someone who is approaching history from the perspective of Africa being at the center. So obviously any African civilizations should be studied from an Afrocentric perspective. Obviously we know it's now become, and I'll be honest with you, when I first started what I was doing, I didn't want to take on any of these labels. I just want to say, look, I'm a researcher, I'm not this, that, and the other. But actually I found myself actually embracing the term Afrocentric when it was thrown, when it was thrown at me as a slur. I decided that I was going to embrace it, because what I don't like is when, the Eurocentric world and those, who are kind of like proxies of the Eurocentric world, such as the Arabs, etc., they try to basically take the words that we create that have a purpose and then use them against us and make us almost scared to use them. I always get that example on my channel of the word woke. That was a word 10, 15 years ago that Black people were very proud to use. I liked calling myself woke. You meet someone who's got their head screwed and it's like, oh, this brother's woke, and they've stolen that word from us now, to the point where we kind of avoid it like the plague, because they've made it seem like it's something that's so, something that's so negative. And I didn't want them to do that with Afrocentric. So I've very much embraced that term, even though I don't see myself, I just saw myself as someone who was approaching history. And as you heard from what I said at the very start, I don't even call everything African. Sometimes I just talk about Black history. If we're going to talk about, because I believe that Black people are indigenous to the earth.
Yeah, I want to add something to that.
On every single continent.
I want to add something to that real quick. The challenge that I've had when it comes to communicating things, like back in the days, growing up, I had got to the point where I embraced using it, and I still embrace it, using the term Black and proud, like James Brown used to say, right? And then, I encountered brothers and sisters that I have a great respect for. Some of us, they like to be identified as, they identify themselves or associate with the Hebrew traditions and ways of life. Then you've got some that see themselves, that have done, maybe they have some research backing where they associate with being Native American. Then you have some that, like we're talking about now, that study the history of Kemet and associate with that. Then, like myself, I'm associated with my ethnic origins of ancestry of Africa, the Timne peoples. And so when I would go to one group of people that say, "Oh, brother, don't call me black," or "Oh, brother, everybody's not Hebrew," or "Oh, brother, everybody's not," so I'm like, because for me, my objective is unification.
Yeah.
And even my greeting, when I say to people, I say "Salam alaikum," and that's the greeting that's found in the way that I'm upon, right? And for me, it's not offensive to me, but somebody hears that and they become withdrawn because they associate it with a concept that they have.
Yeah.
And so some might say, okay, I say shalom. I say, okay, shalom. Another say hotep, hotep, and on and on and on. So it's it's been like a balancing act for me to be able to be brotherly to those who I see as my people, especially the learned amongst us, so that I can demonstrate what that looks like in my own life.
I think black people on the whole struggle a lot with myopia and dogma. We find it very difficult to understand, and I always say this, African Americans have a very unique, I say African Americans, I normally just call them Black Americans actually, to be honest with you, but Black Americans have a very unique and varied history. That's very different to mine. I'm Nigerian, so I've got quite a straightforward, at least immediate history. My immediate history is that essentially I'm Yoruba. I'm Benin somewhere down the line as well, but I've still got a very kind of like narrow history in terms of like my parentage and my ethnicity and where I come from. That's very clear. Whereas Black Americans have got all of the above, all those things that you mentioned before.
Yes.
I don't think any of them are invalid, by the way. And I think a lot of people have a myopic or dogmatic point of view where they believe only the one can be true. So you meet a lot of these native, Black Americans who are kind of embracing native, and they'll say, "Oh, we hate Africans." and then you'll meet the African ones, and they'll say, "Oh, you're not native, you're deluded, you're not," and then you'll meet everyone thinks the Hebrews are crazy, and then you got the Moors, but one thing I'm learning is that all of the above, all of these people are correct.
It all applies.
And it's very likely, as a Black American from anywhere in America, that you have a mixture of ancestry, because that's just the nature of how these things work. If you go back, 400 years, I think that's 64,000 ancestors. I'll have to go back and check, but 64,000 ancestors. That's 64,000 people who have contributed to make you who you are. If you think all of those people were in one place, then you're not serious. It's very likely you had some that were from here, some that are from there, and they've all contributed, and in the end it's kind of like made you who you are. So I totally empathize and understand with the kind of like Black American struggle with identifying, tell them that you need to identify with 6 different, origin stories. Tell anyone else in the world that's like, what? No one has to deal with that. But Black Americans do have to deal with that. They literally have been, are an amalgamation of people stolen from different parts of the world that have ended up in one place. So it's very complex. And I get the fact that I'm actually very patient. I've been on a few live streams where I've been literally shouted down by these kind of like Native Americans who are kind of like, African, this, that, and I don't know what it is, but I'm very patient with it. I just kind of like, I always empathize with it because I'm kind of like, they're on the journey. And I'm actually just happy that they've got to the place where they understand that some of that native story belongs to Black Americans. Whereas, a few years ago, a decade ago, no one was saying that. A decade ago, no one, a couple of decades ago, no one assumed that Black people had anything to do with the Native Americans. And luckily now the history has been erased. The same with the Moors. If you go back 2 or 3 decades, the Moors from Europe, the Blacks from Europe who ended up in America, no one was talking about them.
Yes.
Everyone was kind of buying the lie that everybody came from Nigeria, and that was one of the things that I fought against very, very vehemently, because I was like, look, guys,
Yeah.
I know you think that Nigeria populated all of South America, all of Cuba, all of Brazil, all of Panama, all of the West Indies, all of America.
Right.
Yeah. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa, and we do not have the written or oral record of losing that many people. We know who we lost. We know which tribes were responsible, ethnicities were responsible for colluding with, you know, with the Portuguese, then colluding with, you know, the Spanish.
That's
We
a
know
good
who
point
they
right
are,
there.
and we know the numbers. And I'm telling you right now, those numbers do not add up. The maths doesn't maths.
Right.
So some of you did come from Africa. I'm not saying there was no one from Africa. There certainly was a large amount of people from Africa, but they certainly weren't all from Nigeria, first of all. And they certainly aren't responsible for the peopling of all of the black people in the Western Hemisphere. You have to answer the question as to why there are more black people in Brazil than there are whites. You have to answer the question as to why there are more black people in Cuba than there are whites. You have to answer the question as to why black people outnumbered white people, I think 4-1 at the end of slavery. And obviously that number's gone down worryingly low now. But
I'm glad that you mentioned that, right? Because
yeah.
this brings me to another aspect of this. And also in the chat, by the way, peace and blessings to all those coming in. I see you. I'm acknowledging your commentary. You know, some of them know it's been a little while since I returned to doing these lives again. You know, dealing with some internal issues or whatnot. But what you were just talking to me about with Brazil and the likes of that, you know, ancient Mexico, ancient Olmec territory, it makes me think of none other than the scholar Runoko Rashidi. Does that name
Rest in
come up
peace.
to your radar? Rest in
Of
peace.
course.
The
Of
late
course. We lost
Rashidi.
him recently.
Let
Of course, he
me
was a
share.
massive eye-opener for my research, because he did the very important job. In fact, he did something that I want to continue, but he did the very important job of photo documenting, which before he did it, no one was doing it. One of the most effective things that they did, particularly in the realm of ancient Egypt, is they simply didn't show us the images. So we take it for granted now because we got the internet, and we got, you know, you just Google search and you get every single. But before there was Google, and when there was just books, the Egyptologists did a very, very good job of hiding certain imagery, making sure you never see it, making sure that unless you had the money to go and fly to a museum in France or Belgium or Germany or Egypt, you were never going to see these images. And Runoko Rashidi did a fantastic job
Let's check out
photo documenting our history. Yeah.
This is a clip for those that may not know who Runoko, late brother Runoko is. This is a clip, very, you know, see, as I say to you, just like I was saying to you, young brother, I agree that you need to hold on to that title. We need to embrace what we are. You know, for me, you know, I just ascribe myself as being a traveler. I'm just passing through, but we need to embrace these things because it's our identity. It's our, you know, if you go to a carpenter shop, the guy's not going to tell you, "Oh, I'm not a carpenter." He's going to say, "I'm the carpenter." Who's the carpenter here? I am. Who's the plumber in here? I am. The plumber's over there. You know, they're going to hold on to their, "I'm Dr. so and so." They're going to hold on to their qualifications. What gives them the qualifications? This is the journey of research that they have put forth. They put in the homework. They've done the work. Here's a brother that has done the work. You're a brother that's doing the work. Let's check out Runoko.
Nile Valley was the great population center. At least it was one of the population centers. And as pressure was brought to bear on the people of the Nile Valley through invasions, those Africans in that part of Africa spread out and filtered to the other part of Africa, other parts of Africa, and migrated to the distant corners of the world. Now, at some point in time, we'll talk at least briefly about migrations. But when you talk about migrations, you have to talk about it in a plural sense. There wasn't one movement, it's a whole series of movements, sporadic, over tens of thousands of years. And so that may be the reason that we have pyramidal-like structures in the Western Hemisphere. I think it's safest to talk about those. In terms of an Egyptian or Nile Valley connection, you have them in Mexico, Guatemala, in Honduras, in Belize. The problem that I have is the discrepancy in terms of time. The Great Pyramid is built about 4,600 years ago, but most of the pyramids that we see in the Mayan world, for example, were built less than 1,500 years ago. So could it be that it was an ancient tradition brought to the Americas by Africans that continued, or is there a connection? Another thing you have to ask yourself is, what were the pyramids used for in the Americas? Now, from my gathering, a lot of the pyramids, if not all of them in the Americas, the Inca, the Maya, the Aztec, etc., the Olmec, they were used for religious rituals, whereas the pyramids in the Nile Valley were used for tombs. And so I think that to tie the pyramids of Africa together with pyramidal-like structures in other parts of the world requires a little bit more research and a little more corroboration than what I'm currently seeing.
Hello?
That was our late brother, Runoko Rashid. And definitely, I have a great deal of respect for that brother. I've, much like I've been doing with your videos, I've watched, this brother travel and go different places. He makes me laugh because he'll do things where, like, I remember one time he stood before these Olmec statues and the head literally looked like his head. Yeah. This was before AI technology or anything. They didn't even have that then. So he was doing this on purpose. You know what I mean? He was like here's this giant Olmec statue, and his head just happens to look like Runoko's head. Like this was destiny for him to do this and demonstrate this, right? So that was a one solid brother who put in the work. And one thing I got out of this is that, and I'm going to say this in a spiritual context, that when we move forward, when we endeavor to seek knowledge, the evidence will always be available for us. Many of us haven't even left our front porch, let alone the city they live in. And so all they know is, whatever is relevant locally, unless they hear it through some other means or through the internet or this or that. But I often tell brothers, I say, you need to, what are you doing? Pack some bags and go. Pack some bags and go travel. Pick a place. Africa's an enormous country. You'll find some place that you can connect with. Do some research if you have to prior to that, but go out and see what's there and see with your own eyes, touch with your own hands. It makes all the difference versus sitting at home in front of a desktop. And that's what Runoko would do. He literally traveled and would show you. He wouldn't just talk about, well, here's how this is related to our ancient ancestors. He would show you. He would show you the evidence. Like, look, you can't argue with what your eyes are seeing. You can't argue with that this agrees with the years, the dated, the carbon dating, and so on. Yeah,
I mean, like I said, I think I owed him a great debt, particularly like in my very early years of just kind of getting into understanding that Black people had very rich history. And like I said, a lot of his work, which was just visual, and sometimes I think that's why I actually have such a I put so much emphasis on the visual element, because I think it's one thing to, like you said, tell people or to talk and discuss, but it's another thing to show people, and then to actually show, sometimes people aren't aware of what they're looking at, because we don't realize how much of a how much of a mind job has been done on the population in general, and that includes us, in terms of the way that we interpret history. There are so many tropes and so many rules at play that even when we see things, like for instance, I'm glad you mentioned the Olmec heads. Many people relate to the Olmec heads because they have a perception or vision of black that they associate with black people. This is what they must have all looked like historically. You know, if you look at the Olmec heads, they are close to, the the images that were created of black people in the Americas, such as the minstrels. They got the very big lips, very broad nose.
Yes.
But then we look in our own families as black people, me as a Nigerian, you as an American, and we see a whole range of features and we ignore them.
Yes.
We when it comes to history, we ignore them. We're looking for the broad nose and big lips, even though we got a sister who's got a really narrow nose and thin lips, and we got a really, we got all of these things. We got a really light skinned auntie, and we ignore them because we think, oh no, this is what black is, and that's a result of decades, centuries of programming us to believe that you all look like this. One of the things that I try and do on my channel is to tell people, no, you see this variety that you have in your family, see this variety that you see when you come to Africa, that variety has always been there. So when you see that statue there that looks a bit like your light-skinned auntie, that's because it probably did look like your light-skinned auntie. It's not because it's a white person.
It's not a mistake.
Say that again.
I said what observed isn't by mistake.
Exactly.
I think
it's not by mistake. And I can hear you now. Yeah, you just broke up for a moment.
Okay. I have here. This is the late Dr. Ivan Van Sertimi, another a great, profound scholar from amongst us, amongst our brethren, our kindred, if you would, who fought adamantly in showing the links between not only the evidence of ancient Kemet, different areas in Africa, Ethiopia, you name it, showing the ties between that and not only of our ancestry.
There.
Yeah. Let me hold on. Let me put that up here. Can I do that?
There you go. What am I?
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. I've got a couple of his books.
But he also tied the fact that, let me just say to you that Christopher has nothing on this brother. And I'm talking about that Joker that they say discovered America. And they talk, I mean, this is to show you, especially when even their own scholars today will bear witness that isn't true. Right. And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, you're saying that now, but many of us have to go through years of public school.
But they're still teaching it.
Still teaching it.
They still use that phrase. It's insulting to everybody, to say that he discovered a place where people already were, and they still do it.
Basically, they're saying that, okay, well, when you get out of public school, out of elementary school, then you can know the truth about the matter. But in the meantime, we're going to shove this right back down your throat and see how many more we can catch.
Yeah. How
many more we can dupe and put some blindfolds over. Because that's basically what has happened. Many of us, because of that type of programming, I believe it's affected our ability to appreciate our ancestry, our achievements, and really our connection to the whole world at large. Peace and blessings, dear brother, coming in. And so when we don't see ourselves connected, if the only thing many of us believe that the only great thing we've achieved was turning peanuts into soap. And they will readily show you George Washington Carver in a textbook. But they won't show you some of these other great authorities and whatnot and their achievements. They won't, Mansa Musa. Many of us didn't even know about Mansa Musa until college. You understand? And that was on our own endeavor. Like, Mansa Musa was a very rich person, the richest person in the world. On and on and on. But this brother right here wasn't having it. He wasn't having it. He was another profound scholar who insisted on, and one of the words that stick to my mind, if I thought about a quote from him, is hard proof, hard evidence. That's what he always emphasizes, because people, and I'm going to get to something here after I show this, your adversaries, those who've tried to challenge your work. And there's one humorous one that in particular that I'm going to bring up here shortly. But you might know who I'm talking about already, just by me saying humorous, because he's very humorous to me. But this brother right here wasn't letting anybody cut him short. He would come when in every lecture, here is the hard evidence. You can't deny it no matter what you want to say. This is what it is. Now what are you going to say? Let me go ahead and press the play on it.
So you could see what I mean by playing the fool. Anyway, I used to swim across the river, so I was extremely strong. And I knew about currents, because most people think the river is just like that. No, the river is alive. In certain parts of the falls in Guyana, the water is running as fast as a motor car. You don't have to have an engine. You have to know how to steer, or it hits you against the rock and you're blown to pieces. The water moves as fast as a motor car. And in those waters, they do not move as fast as a motor car, the great rivers, but they move with force and take you places. And we've discovered 3 currents of Africa that take you automatically to America. There's one of the Cape Verde, one of the Senegambia coast, one of the southern coast of Africa. Once you are caught in those currents, you have to come to America unless the fish get you first. Whether you have an engine or not, the water is the engine. It's very powerful. And it's exactly where those currents end that we find the African presence. It goes to Mexico. It goes into other parts of America. It goes to Brazil. They've recently found, listen to this, look at the lies involved here. They recently found an African Negro woman. I say Negro because not all blacks are Negro. The African has 6 faces. For example, if you're in a dry African climate, you have a narrow nose. If you're in a wet or moist African climate, you have a broad nose. Most people don't know that. They don't know they have 6 types of African. There's the Nilotic type. They're all black. But they have the Nilotic type, the so-called true Negro type, all sorts of types they have. And I have in my new book the faces of the various types. And all of these types appear. But what is most extraordinary is the evidence we have of their ships. They had the ships. Thor Heyerdahl became world famous because he got the Baduma people on Lake Chad to build a boat that the Africans built before Christ. Thor Heyerdahl used the boat the Africans built before Christ. They showed him the model. They built the boat. He financed it. A boat they were using before Christ, and it crossed the Atlantic successfully. Heyerdahl told me, Van Sertima, we did not even have to fish. The fish jumped on board because in those currents are millions of fish, millions. And it wasn't just Heyerdahl.
All right, what do you have to say about Dr. Ivan Van Sertima?
I don't know what to say. You know, great scholar, like you said earlier. Once again, one of my kind of foundational resources from very, very early on. Obviously opened my eyes to the native black presence in America. And I find it amazing how ready people are to undermine or ignore the evidence that he presented as well. Because I find this not just in academia, but even amongst black people. They're so unwilling to believe mountains of evidence when it's presented by black scholars, and so
Right,
willing to
right.
accept, you know, crumbs and conjecture from European scholars. You know,
Even those that
I,
aren't even scholars. If someone just
yeah,
has a
yeah, there's
certain
people,
persona,
yeah.
a Sean Connery style of deliverance,
Well, look
they will.
the recent, and I don't know if this is the person you're going to mention in terms of the detractors, but Metatron has just recently, yeah, there you go,
Yeah,
recently done a video on the Moors, which I'm going to respond to. And I'm not going to go into the whole concept of people trying to argue that the Moors weren't black. I mean, it's just the most stupid thing in the world. Literally, the word means black, and they're trying to argue that they weren't black. That's the kind of that this is what we have go up against as black scholars, when people literally will try and appropriate our history and give it to another section of society. But
yeah,
the thing that I wanted to mention in regards to that is the fact that his evidence is the same as all of these people who claim that evidence, and they have literally one resource. So they got this one resource which they misinterpret. It's this book of the kind of like that shows a few kind of Arab looking people in tents, and they all use this same resource and say this is it. This is the proof that. But then black people literally, like I did in my video, I gave about 20 to 30 sources, different sources, showing the Moors as unequivocally black, sources from museums, images I've taken in museums of the Moors, images I've found online of people described as Moors, dictionary definitions, definitions
yes,
from ancient Greeks, definitions from Rome. I mean, literally across the board, from going, you know, a span in a time period of 2,000 years, a consistent application of the term Moor exclusively used for black people. And
I got
they
one for
present
you.
one source, one resource, and then people
Mhm.
act like we need to have some debate about this.
Right.
It's like,
The
why would I
term,
need to debate someone who has one source?
right. The term Africa. The term Africa, at least I have had learned. I know that there are some people who like to associate it with this Italian individual who had the there's it's like a nickname. It's like a suffix to a name, like a title given to him. It wasn't his name. It was a title given to him because of his voyages, and so he was called Africanus or whatnot because of where
Leo
his voyages.
Africanus.
Right. And
He was
so as you know,
actually
but
he was
people,
actually he was actually Iberian.
but the problem
So,
is that
yeah.
when people say the word Africa, they think well, oh, you didn't even. They think that the term Africa itself is not indigenous.
Mm.
You understand that it was so. See, I think the point I'm trying to get at is a lot of our what derived from us at some point in time. We either will take this idea and deny that it's from us and give it to someone else and associate it, like Christopher Columbus, like, oh, well, he discovered America and not us. We didn't do it first, but he did. Why? Because that's what we're taught. Or we didn't name our own countries, our own continent, our own places where we lived, but so-and-so did, or it was named after this person. It's like we give everything to the colonizers when in many cases what we're giving to them was actually from us in the first place.
Yeah.
Even if I said Ankabula, Africa, all these terms, Ethiopia, all these were formulas that find their origin in an indigenous way and not a foreign way.
Well, I've pondered about Africa a lot because I'm still not 100% clear on the etymology of it. But one thing that I have noticed is that, or one of the things that I would say would definitely lean me towards believing it's an indigenous name, is because there's actually three, I want to say suffixes, but I don't think that's the correct terminology. But if you look at names, indigenous names in Africa, the three most common endings, and this is actually almost universal, right from east to West Africa,
Yes.
to south, are ka, ba, and ra.
Yes. Yes.
Which is sometimes Ke, Be, and Re. But Ka, Ba, and Ra, or Ke, Be, and Re, are like the most common endings to names. You find those names in literally every single ethnicity. So, and when you find them, that they are actually quite unique to Africa. So this is one of the reasons why I think that Africa is probably indigenous. I think it's very likely that it maybe wasn't, because the whole idea of naming a continent, by the way, is a recent thing. Even the whole idea of naming a country is a recent thing that a lot of people's miss. If you look historically, really cities was the thing that people came from. People didn't come from countries, they came from cities. Your country could change depending on who conquers you, but your city never changed.
Right.
So you could be, you know, you could be from, you know, I'm Jesus of Nazareth. Okay.
Right.
The Romans could overthrow the Israelites, and then Nazareth can become a part of Rome, but you're still a Nazarite. And that's literally how it worked in the ancient world, or I'd even say in the Middle Ages. People would associate with the city that they're from as opposed to nations. And it's the same thing with continents. The whole idea of naming a continent didn't happen before. So normally it's kind of like a people would be given a name. So for a long part of history, like you mentioned earlier, most of Africa was called Ethiopia. And then for a large part of the Middle Ages, most of Africa was called the Sudan. And then so the whole idea of that, what was the name of this big landmass? And kind of my response is it probably didn't have a name. In reality,
I think that's more likely.
Absolutely. I think they one of the topics that comes up quite regularly in discussion is this whole idea of the Europeans making themselves, when I say Europeans, I mean the modern Europeans, making themselves, turning themselves into the default, making themselves the dominant. Right. So essentially they take black people and they essentially say, this is a Negroid. Shamaka Keita talks about this extensively and goes into some really good detail. But essentially, they kind of take the bloom and black approach and they say, this is a Negro. Okay, this is a black person. And they'll get someone who essentially has a combination of features that you'll never see in a modern European. So they say, well, we have narrow noses, so he has to have a super wide nose. We have thin lips, so he has to have super thick lips. We have white skin, so he has to have super black skin. And they say, well, that's a true Negro. But then they'll take a black person, like we talked about earlier, who maybe is of Ephratic stock, maybe Nile Valley stock, maybe Fulani stock, for instance, and they'll see that, okay, check, he has the dark skin, check, he has maybe full lips, but look at that nose. That nose is not as thick as his. He must have a little bit of European in him. Forgetting the fact that they descend from us and not the other way around. So they place themselves as the dominant. Anytime they see any kind of variation that leads to a feature that they share or looks like it could be a hybrid of that true Negro and their feature, they say it's because of their admixture.
Yes.
When that's never the case. We had all of this variety before they even existed. They just happened to descend from a very narrow subset of our cousins, so to speak. They come from a very, very narrow subset, which is why their features are confined to this very small window of features, whereas ours span right across all feature sets. And you can't turn around to a jet black Kenyan who has a narrow nose and thin lips, because most Kenyans do, by the way, not a minority. A majority of Kenyans have very narrow noses and very thin lips. You know, you can't turn around to them and tell them that they're a result of hybridization with Europeans. They'll laugh at you in your face. They'll say, what? When did this happen? When it didn't happen. Yeah, they'll tell you to your face. So yeah, just building upon the point that you literally just raised there, about the whole idea that they'll turn around to someone and they'll see variation in our family and they'll somehow insert themselves into the story. It's like, actually, if there's one thing that genetics has proved, it's proved that we Africans aren't mixed, most of us. Most Africans don't carry any Neanderthal DNA, but it's also proven that all Europeans are mixed. So the very people who are accusing us of admixture are actually the ones who are mixed. You might be lily white with blonde hair and blue eyes. I guarantee you've probably got at least 10% recent African ancestry. Recent.
Somewhere in
And
there.
they do not like to admit it, but they know it's true. They know all of Europe carries recent African ancestry, recent Black African ancestry. As much in America, it's even worse. I think in America, and I find this hilarious because I'm like, how do Americans explain that? How do you it's like they've revealed this, but I don't know why. Kind of like you Black Americans aren't giving them hell over this, but they've revealed by genetic ancestry that white Americans carry more Black ancestry than their European counterparts, an average 20%. I think that's the average. So white Americans carry on average 20% Black American ancestry. I think that's hilarious because like how are they explaining that? How are they explaining that away? Because you can explain away, you've got the one drop rule. So you can explain using your fuzzy logic why Black people carry some European ancestry, but how are they explaining it the other way around if there was a one drop rule?
That makes a lot of sense. But the thing is many. I know there are a few brothers, even before social media, who've been on this topic for a long time. The thing is that most will, just like in the music industry, if we're saying anything that makes any sense, most likely you're not going to hear us on the mainstream radio. The only way you're going to hear us on the mainstream radio, where you can pop it up in London and in Brazil or wherever in the world, is if we're saying some nonsense, something degrading, something foolish. You're likely to hear us on the radio. But if we're actually saying something, if we're actually putting two and two together, making some sense, making some logic, making some reason, you're probably not going to hear us on the mainstream radio. So that leads people to do is to think that all we do is play basketball, all we do is rap about being a gangster, all we do is and sell rock. That's the image that you would. Yeah. When you actually land down, when people actually land down on the ground, you actually see geniuses at pretty much every block that you never even knew existed. I mean, I've sat and talked to young brothers and elders and met people that will blow your mind with what they've been paying attention to in life. Real quick, I want to click this video of the late Dr. John Henry Clark. He's another person who wasn't cutting no corners when it comes to defending the frontiers of our story. And he has a certain style. Ivan Van Sertima, he has his style. He has more of like a professor, proper character. But John, he digs in. He digs in. he digs in your emotions a little bit. Let me play him.
What we are dealing with now is more than the second rise of Europe. We're dealing with the rise of a concept that has taken hold of the mind of most of the world, and people throughout the world are now fighting to get away from that concept, and a whole lot of people are prisoners to that concept. We're dealing with the reason certain things looked as though they were going to succeed and did not succeed. We're actually dealing with the reason why the African independence explosion did not culminate in independence, why the civil rights movement did not culminate in any civil rights, and why the Caribbean Federation did not culminate in any independence from Caribbean states. Independence in name only, flag independence, but actual economic independence, they are more dependent now than they were at the height of colonialism. It set in motion the exposure of the fact that once you are oppressed And once said information is kept from you, you begin to experience some confusion about what independence consists of. Now, let's look at the world before Columbus, then let's pick up Columbus's world and look at his impact on the Americas, and look at the world he did not discover. But what he actually did, and he should be credited for this, he set in motion the exploitation of two continents for European domination. He never set foot on North America or South America. He set in motion an attitude that is still with us, a concept called divine white right, and something else called manifest destiny. The assumption, because Europeans had the ships and the basic technology, they had the right to go into other people's country, exploit their mineral resources, to take and rape their women at will. And they did all of this in the name of a God that they said was merciful and kind.
I wanted to share that little clip. I didn't mean to close the window for it, though. The key thing that I was trying to get out of what he was saying there, all of it is heavy material, but this idea that is expressed, I mean, almost globally, that somehow, you know, these are the supreme authorities of anything, meaning I'm talking about knowledge, of information, of what is true, of what is false. And why am I saying that? Is because the minute we take on a path that produces a truth that is contrary to what they have propagated, we become an opponent. We become an adversary or someone that they have to despise. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's something in the nature of this that they have grown, that is a feature of their character. This stands out to me. It's no surprise to me at all that one like the light, and this isn't to belittle or to shame. It is what it is. But it's not a surprise to me that ones like Metatron felt offended or felt that they had to rise to the occasion and put on their cape and their banner to attack this person who dares contradict what they have been trying to wholesale to people across the world regarding history. I want to I'm gonna share this clip here, but it's not a surprise to me that, you know, a quote unquote Egyptologist feels offended, because they have invested in this. They've invested their educational institutions. They've invested their finances. They've invested their political powers. All their establishments have been invested in making sure that their face, that their identity is, you know, reigns supreme across the land. So when you think of greatness in Egypt, this is the image you look for. If you type in an American, a proud patriotic American, watch what you pick up. Watch what you get. Watch what the first images would be if I say a proud patriotic American. Is my image going to show up? Probably not. Even if I was a proud patriotic American, probably not going to show my picture.
I agree. I'll tell you, I'll say one thing though. One of the things that's very encouraging and that actually makes my job a lot easier is once you've made the decision that you're going to stand on truth, however truth presents itself. That's one of the things. We mustn't ever get into a position where we're going to be dogmatic or religious and about history. You can't do that. You can't say, well, I'm going to stand on this belief even when you've been proven wrong. You have to be willing to put your hand up and say, well, actually, the data doesn't support me in this area. So I either need to find some new data to support me, or I'm going to need to change my perspective on this. And the reasons I say that, one of the encouraging things is because when you stand on truth, it actually becomes really easy to debate people like Metatron. I don't find it difficult at all, because essentially a position or a paradigm built on lies is very, very hard to defend. When you've come back home late, when you live like your mum's, and then you're trying to lie about it, and then you're putting lies. Like, that's the most difficult thing to do. They just got to ask you a couple of, or you get shift by the police or something like that, and you're lying. No, I was here. You won't stand. They just got to keep asking questions, and eventually it's going to crumble. And this is what you have with Eurocentrism. When they're trying to debate with us about things like Black Egypt, it's like, you can't win this battle. This is why the battle with Metatron, if you want to call it that, it was only a battle in the mind of Eurocentrists.
Yes.
To me, it was a very, very easy dismantling of a very flaky set of lies. If you the entire premise of your argument is, oh well, they had a tan, and I'm gonna ignore, and you're gonna ignore 99% of the statues because they look too African, pretend you don't see them, and you're going to ignore all of the quotes, or try and disprove quotes from a dozen historians, all of the really highly esteemed Greek historians who all agree that the ancient Egyptians were very black people. If you're going to ignore everything in terms of anthropology, you're going to ignore their black bodies, black bodies, literally with black limb proportions, look like, the ancient Egyptian mummies look like a bunch of mummified Kenyan runners. That's literally what their limbs are like. So I can hear. What's that noise?
That's my Alexa.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah.
So put in a reminder.
Okay, cool. So if you're gonna ignore all of that, and it's an impossible argument for there to win, because I've got almost like a limitless amount of data that I could draw upon and say, okay, well, what about this? And they're relying on one or two things and hoping that their lies are gonna, the house of cards is gonna stay together. It didn't. Like, in the end, Metatron's having to U-turn on a whole bunch of things, and now he's kind of left ancient Egypt alone. He's gone off to the Moors, and I'm gonna do the same thing to him there.
Else, right?
I'm gonna do the same thing to him there. If he wants to take that into a 2 or 3 round debate like he did with Egypt, I'm ready for that. Because he can't win on that. There's no way you're going to prove to the world that the Moors were white. It's the most stupid thing in the world.
Dear brothers and sisters who are viewing, I'm gonna play this clip. And can you? I have this clip right here. I see that you were sharing with breaking bread with another personality and young scholar, Kweli Mika.
Yeah, Kweli Mika. Yeah, good friend of mine. Yeah.
Can you tell me what when I press this play button, I've got it marked at a certain spot, but can you tell? I mean, 'cause you guys can go ahead when you get the chance, take a look at the channel. We'll have the information so you can find this channel with ease. It's also in the description as well. But what's going on here? This is part 2, if I remember correctly, which means that this has been going on for some time. And I think I remember like some of the earlier initial ones responding to Metatron. Of all names to title yourself, Metatron. I'm just thinking to myself, because I'm a metaphysics, student. I like metaphysics. Yeah. I like things like that. Metatron's cube is one of those, tools of discussion in that. But anyway, what's going on here? In this clip, what's going on in this video? What's happening?
Are you gonna play it?
Yeah, I'm gonna play it. I was just wondering if you wanted to like say anything
Okay,
about
yeah,
this
because I mean, this is, I
scholarship.
mean, it's
about
this
this
I mean, it's a long-standing debate. So I think I can't remember how many videos were made in the end, but essentially, Metatron was the first to strike. Obviously, we're just doing our own thing with our channels, and then Metatron decided to do a video called "Were the Ancient Egyptians Black," which should have just been called "The Ancient Egyptians Weren't Black," because that was
So
his
he was
entire
responding.
approach.
What
He wasn't
was
responding to anything. That was just he was responding to the fact that our channels were getting traction and the fact that we were, you know, I think he has a narcissistic element to him, where he wants to be viewed as this kind of authority. And so he came in with the typical kind of European arrogance where he's just like,
you were on his turf.
Yeah, but also that kind of arrogance where, you know, where he thought he was just going to saunter in and just kind of like say a couple of long words and scare us off, you know,
Right.
but he picked the wrong ones because
My professional vocabulary win the day.
Yeah, that's literally what he thought. He thought he was going to come in and say a couple of long words and scare us off. And so I was like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So first of all, Quelly Mika responded to him with a very good video kind of dressing him down. I just made a short initially. So I just kept it very, very brief. I made a short, which basically just explained to him, you know, he basically tried to use one black person, Mahershala Ali, the American actor. He tried to use him as his kind of like, you know, this is a black person.
The
And then
archetype black person, right?
Yeah, exactly. The true Negro. That was his true Negro form. And so I just made a short basically saying, don't try and do that to Africans, mate. Don't you flip in there, you know.
But that's what they say. They say we're all the same. All black people
exactly.
alike.
And they do that deliberately because whilst he was showing an image on his wall that maybe didn't look like Mahershala Ali, but looked exactly like someone from the Afar tribe who you've met many of them already, you know. And then he showed another image who maybe didn't look like Mahershala Ali, but maybe looked like someone who had more Kenyan features or something like that. So he was very clever. He knew exactly what he was doing. But one thing he didn't do is he didn't put an image of an Arab and then say, this is a white man or this is an Arab man. He avoided that. It's kind of like he, clip. You know,
you had one clip where he showed a zoomed in aspect of a pixel, of the white part of the pixel.
Oh, we cooked him for that. Don't worry about that.
I was like, really? He did that?
No, we cooked him for that. The good thing about it is when we did our response, so after I did my short, he then did a video where it was basically a character assassination. He just thought, okay, I can't win this battle on a scholastic front. So he tried to do a character assassination of Quelly Mika. And then me and Quelly Mika, I was just like, I contacted Quelly Mika. I said, look, he's mentioned us both in this video. Let's just cook him. So when I cook people, I like to do it proper. I don't do kind of like pick and choose. We did its entire video and literally on a live stream as well. So you can't accuse us of, you know, cherry picking. You can't accuse us of editing. You know what I mean? This is like, no, every time we did a response to Metatron, it was a live stream and we played this video in full from start to finish. So no one can say we literally addressed every single one of his points and completely dismantled them because, like I said, houses of cards are very easy to blow over. So we did that, and then he did a response to that, and he knew he had to come back a bit better with his next response because we addressed him down so thoroughly. And he kind of like did some U-turns, but then we still responded to that in a live stream and still dismantled that as well. So by the end of it, he knows for a fact he got thoroughly cooked. Metatron knows for a fact he got cooked in that debate. And in the end, by his last video, the one thing I will give him credit for is by his last video, he was giving credit where credit is due. He's like, look, when I came in this, I thought these guys didn't know anything. They know what they're talking about. They've raised some arguments. I've got some areas here where I might have to make a U-turn. And I did appreciate that maturity. I did. I'm going to appreciate that as a scholar. Someone, you know, turn around and say, you know what, I'm actually willing to have a look at some of this data that they presented. You know, if they've really got these melanin tests, which we do, by the way, and I sent them the link for it. You know, if we really do have these melanin tests proving that the Theban nobles were black, which I have, then I'm going to have to revise my position. And since then, he hasn't revisited ancient Egypt. He knows it's a no-fly zone. So
let's check him out. Let's check out this clip that I have here. I've started it at a certain point in the conversation because it's getting ready to, you're building up to a point, and then boom, you show something that he's trying to come at you with. Let me go ahead and press play.
Credits you, but I know what it means, but doesn't mean that others know that very specific meaning. It's like the term woke. Like the guys who started calling themselves woke and saying you are woke, they knew what they meant. But today, if you're called woke, people don't take you seriously anymore.
Yeah.
It's basically what happens with the term Afrocentric.
Absolutely. It's called, I think it's called a semantic shift, isn't it? When a word has a certain meaning, and then they drift it along, and all of a sudden,
exactly.
One of the words, obviously, that I challenge quite a lot on my channel is like sub-Saharan, and then there's always some Eurocentric idiot or just some European idiot comes, oh, you shouldn't be ashamed of being. I said, first of all, idiot, no one's ashamed of anything. Yeah, no one's ashamed of anything here. You got the wrong African if you look at anyone who has any level of being ashamed. Okay, but you do not get to define us. Okay, and we do not define ourselves as sub-Saharan. It's not even geographically correct.
Yep,
so
right.
how do you think you got to go around calling people sub-Saharans and Afrocentrics? And like I said, I don't ever show any shame or turn around and say I'm not Afrocentric, because that's what people. I've noticed there is a bit of a trend where some new recent black scholars want to separate themselves from Afrocentrism, so they attack what they see as the Afrocentric movement. They go, oh, I'm not like those Afrocentrics there, they don't know how to read, all this that, and they come out of all this crap, which I do not do. So one of the things, this is why it kind of creates a bit of a problem, because on the one hand, I don't want to physically separate myself from black scholars. I have no problem people putting me in a bucket that includes Diop and Ivan van Sertima, John Hendrik Clark, the great black scholars of, Joseph Ben Yochanan. I have no problem putting me in a bucket and saying you're one of them. Fine, put me as one of them. They're great scholars. Do you understand what I mean? But at the same time, I also know what you're trying to do. You're trying to undermine me. So I'm like, yeah, don't call me that, because you're just using it as a way of undermining my arguments,
Exactly. It's like on Wikipedia, for example, you see Diop's introduction is that they call him Afrocentrist, but they say following that he never called himself that. He never even used the term. So they really use that to discredit his research. Like, oh, it's coming from an Afrocentric point of view. And do you know what Afrocentric means? Read James, I think it's Howie or something, or Mary Levskoet. They don't give you the book of Molefi Asante. They give you the perspective of Mary Levskoet, who says, oh, they believe in mythical history. They create myth as history. So that's the perspective they come from. So that's why I was like, this was an attack on credibility, because he knows what he's doing.
Absolutely. He knows exactly what he's doing. Yeah. And instantly, by calling you that, what he's doing is, from the general public's perspective, they view Afrocentric scholarship as lesser than other forms of scholarship. So straight away, he's trying to knock you down a peg where, oh, well, I'm not. What you've done is not competing with him from a scholarly level or from a scholastic point of view. It's kind of beneath him. And that way, now he doesn't need to address the veracity of your arguments. He can kind of undermine everything that you've done because, oh, it's just an Afrocentric, I'm just humoring.
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, let's move on. And that's a really good question someone just asked. I mean, there's so many good comments going in. I could respond to loads of them. But I really like the point of why is speaking on Afro, well, I like that as well. Whiteness is enough, which is ironic. Thanks, Wesker. Listen, Wesker, by the way, this is my guy, but I'm not going to go into that right now. But why is speaking on African history Afrocentric? The moment you, and that's the thing. Like, I've got an opinion on African history that happens to be birthed in Africa, and I have a very African-centered approach in terms of how I talk about African history. Oh, you're Afrocentric. Okay, fine.
Exactly.
As long as it's not derogatory.
Why don't they want you to speak on your history from your perspective, you know? They want you to speak on their perspective. And they really get angry when you go back and check on what they said on your history. You know, they're like, oh, why are you taking back? As if that's not the whole purpose of the historical field. They go and check back on what they said, if it was accurate or not, or if past scholars did not make mistakes. But when an African does it, they call him Afrocentric. But it's fine when a European goes and reads history. So it's really that.
Let's move on.
That's a good question. Why? Let's move on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is.
Let's go.
Video. There are several factors that influence whether I decide to enter a debate publicly or not. Now, he qualified because he brings forth some decent points. He's clearly educated, and he doesn't call me a racist. So, Quelimika, I commend you for that. With that being said,
see, this is the funny part. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So this guy says I made decent points.
I put it a lot further ahead of the timing that I thought I did.
Zero, as you will see as we go. Then what it was like, he's clearly educated.
Have you heard the part that you wanted to hear yet? Or
I think I might have.
You know what that reminded me of when he said,
well, here, if y'all want to know more about the Metatron and how his mind works, all you have to do is type his name into YouTube. You'll find him. But the point that there was a part that I was trying to get at where he was, kind of going on his antics. Here he's being polite and everything. He's like, sort of giving you props. Like, they're not calling me names or blah, blah, blah. But I was trying to catch the part where he was kind of being clever, trying to, utilize his words to, like, the way he tries to talk in a way we call it, what do they call it, word salad?
That's what I called it. I called it word salad. That's what
he does a lot of word salad. Beginning of his shows, he starts off with this character, like this personality that to me is somewhat artificial, but I think he tries to use that to market with, you know what I mean? To market his brand, to market what he's trying to push out there. And when it's exposed, you understand, you get past all that and get to the meat of what he's saying. He gets exposed, and what do you do? Because all he had to work with was with his fancy techniques of talking.
I mean, honestly, like, in some ways, I wish. Well, I say that now, but I think he's kind of made a brand out of being very anti-black, really, to be totally honest with you, which is sad, because I think potentially he had, his channel has, so I know some people who are on my channel who said they used to be fans of his, and I've looked at, some of his stuff is interesting sometimes, but I think he has this kind of like very much kind of pro-establishment approach to how he kind of views history. And he knows, and basically the people who support him, the people that fund him, his views, 95% of his views come from very far right, kind of like white supremacist perceptive kind of like people. So that's who he's catering towards. I don't have anything against him personally. I don't really care for or against his channel or his techniques or how he communicates to his channel. I just will get involved if he tries to undermine Black history, or if he tries to sell a lie, and that's why I got involved with the Black Egypt discussion, because he was lying, and that lie was reaching a lot of people, and a lot of people were beginning to parrot those lies. So I was almost demanded by my community to respond. They were like, you need to respond to Metatron. And I was like, fine, I will. And I'll do it again, but this time with a new video, the Moors video he's come up with, I have to respond to that, because he called it the truth about the Moors, which is exactly what I called my video. So it was definitely, and he said at the start, a lot of false stuff's being said about the Moors, and I know it was kind of a sly dig at my video, so now I'm going to respond to him. So look forward to a part 2. We're going to have another public spat.
You gotta defend the, you gotta defend our story.
Yeah,
Let me
absolutely.
play this.
I wish him
For
luck with that
somebody
as
was
well.
yes indeed. This is somebody was in the chat. This is actually this Metatron's page here, and it's actually the flip side of that, the video that the two of you were responding to, if I'm correct. Here he's attacking, or he's responding to in his title there, Walimeka,
Yeah, so this
quote
is his
unquote
first response. Yeah.
Black Egyptians. See that man. See, these people are very strategic. That's why you have to pay attention, because these people operate on the use of their choice of words.
Absolutely.
Because they put a lot of emphasis behind why they select certain words to speak with in politics and you name it. Here, Black Egyptians. Let's hear. Let's hear. I'm being random right now. Here we go.
Honest discourse. Hence, every time he uses one, I will point it out and call it out. Within his audience, he has people who are interested in historical truth. I have no quarrel with them whatsoever. But he also has people who are in utter rebellion against external factual reality and have attacked me personally, mostly based on me having white skin, as evidenced by the comments section of my original video. Regardless of all the attacks that I've received on my original video due to his response, I have not disabled the comment section because freedom of speech. But these are clear attempts at manipulation meant to shut down valid criticism or opposing views. This is clearly out of his control, so I encourage my subscribers to not retaliate to that. Skin tone does not matter. Let's attack arguments only. And boy, am I in full assault
He loves
mode
using
today.
free picks and stuff like that. All these little video clips.
This is what we are disagreeing about. My point. Ancient Egypt was a multicultural and multi-ethnic civilization due to its geolocation connecting the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and Europe. A strategic location on the crossroad of continents, flourishing around the Nile River, which was a cultural conduit of civilization. Therefore, there is diversity on the skin of
You don't want to watch
Egyptians.
this whole video,
Throughout
do you?
time and location,
No,
the ethnic percentages will vary depending on era and region.
I'm bored already, honestly.
Of this guy.
No, I've done the whole. I'm so bored of. I can't, because his arguments are so.
I get it. I definitely get it. I will feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
After hearing that, because like you say, he's going on about it. Let me get this off of here. He's going on about it as if like this is just absolute. I've been researching this for 100 years, so I know what I was trying to think of somebody. There was somebody that this reminded me of, where, it's kind of a different venue, but there's a brother that I have a respect for. His name is Sheikh Ahmadidat. I don't know if you ever heard that name before, but he would confront, and his encounters was like more religious, people who would be challenging like the context of the Quran or whatnot, right? And some of his opponents would come. I'm referring to the character of his opponents. They will come at him like, well, we've got all these scholars and all these, this particular book right here was backed by 100, administrative scholars who went to this school. This is how they would introduce themselves. And Ahmadidat would be humbled. All he had was just a little booklet in his hand, and that's it. they're saying, well, we got this, and this. And it's like they feel like that somehow it's like an arrogant type thing. That's what it is. It's like a kind of arrogance that because of all of these qualifications, all these bullet points, badges of honor, everything that you can name, if they had more they could say, if they could have the people right there, they would. This is what they would put forth. So it's kind of like it's more of an arrogant thing, if anything. And as we mentioned, you were somewhat stepping on his perceived turf, so he felt he had to represent the banner of, his audience. Here's an opportunity for me to show just how mighty I am, and because I think that these Negroes are not intelligent. So I can just go roll over there and say my 2 cents, and they will run like little puppies because
exactly.
yeah. So
Yeah, he assumed, and in fairness to him, I think in his mind he assumed he was right. I think a lot of people have taken for granted the mainstream narrative, and we can't discount that. Not everyone out there is literally out to, attack, our version of history. It's just that this is what they've been taught, so they genuinely believe it's true. I think he genuinely believed that ancient Egyptians were essentially the same as modern Egyptians and Arabs. Yeah, I think he genuinely believed that, but I think our arguments made him think otherwise. And I think when he was presented with data and things he hadn't seen in the way that we presented them, and he saw the evidence and realized what he'd been ignoring, I think it changed his perception. And well, I know it changed his perception because he started using different words by his last video than he was using in his first one.
So would you agree that basically it's possible that he might have, through the course of this debate, which is actually the purpose of a debate anyway, is to try to uncover new ground, maybe see something in a way that you didn't see before, as a result making a person think differently. And maybe this encounter was essential for him, so that now, I mean, even when in the situation you talk about now regarding the Moors, if a person only has this and this and this to study from, and it becomes their truth, it's kind of a blindness in a sense. Like there's the things the horses wear when you see them walking, the blinds or whatever,
blinkers, yeah,
blinkers. There we go, the British and the American English. I tell my wife about it all because they speak mixed with Creole. They speak the British style English, so I have to say, well, this is going to confuse me. But I just think that, and I'm saying this, because on this platform in general, the whole purpose that I strive to have these type of discussions is to not to be indifferent or to be, combative, but more to explore, like, what do we know? And especially, I'm talking about our own people. Like, I believe in us, and I believe that there are those of us who are on the job, digging into the research that we need to have. And we need to acknowledge that, recognize it, defend it, and protect it, because this is what we have. How I started, like my earlier, I think I was about 14 or 13 when I was studying like Anthony Browder. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, I've got a couple of his books.
And during that time, I had a brother who was like one of my best friends, right? He was very intelligent, and he had posed to me some strong things to think about when it came to the journey that I'm upon. Where, at that time, and I'm not saying this to belittle the concept of being orthodox, because I know some strong, staunch Orthodox brothers in the path that I'm upon, which is how can I put it? It's titled in the West Islam, it's spelled that way. And I'm saying that because for me that term means something else. It means what I'm doing rather than what I'm labeling myself. It's just I'm telling you what I'm doing in the presence of the Most High. I'm submitting to the Most High. That's all I'm saying. Right now I'm sitting down in a chair. That shouldn't become the title of my act of worship. I'm not a chair sitter. And here are all the congregation of chair sitters. But the term Islam is just like that. It's a verbal noun in grammatical terms. In Arabic, it's an Arabic verbal noun. It's not a title. But anyway, before I met this brother, I had that mindset where I'm a Muslim, you're not, you must be wrong. Absolutely, how dare you challenge the Quran? And that was the mindset that I had. And when I met once like this brother, it was like there was a way that he put a question to me that a person like me who had a grasp of arrogance of my own couldn't defeat. There was like he put a question that I was like, oh man, imagine feeling like you're standing in an auditorium full of people. Then somebody comes and says something to you. Then you open your eyes and nobody's there. You're just like in the room all by yourself. Like, Where did everybody go? Where's everybody? That's how I felt. So then we started to build, and just on all kinds of things, from certain meditation tones and sounds, and all kinds of stuff, next level stuff at that time for me. And this Anthony Browder was one of the people that was a suggested reading, and he never was like pushing me to read something. He was like, here, try this, read this, and me being stubborn, I'm like, I don't want to read it right now. And I put it off. As soon as he goes away, like, let me read what he's talking about here privately. Then, oh, wow. So a lot of my journey has been explorative like that, where I end up, reading the Yi Ching, the Tao Te Ching, you name it, Bhagavad Gita, and opening, just to a perspective more that I would say would be more developed than my younger years. So where I'm at now, I'm much older now. My journey still hasn't stopped. But let me share this with you. And just to give you an idea of how impactful like this brother was, I have a son whose name is Nu. Nu is the name of the brother who posed the question to me. And that, because to me, I take knowledge seriously. It's sacred to me. You understand? Because it's like keys that open doors that allow you to enter to next levels. And so I felt that, I wanted to remember that point in my life. And so my son, his name is Nu. He's also named after the Quranic / biblical prophet named Noah. That's what it means in Hebrew. It's Noah, Nu. But anyway, that was just to share with you a bit of how I started to become more interested in like Kemetic studies and things like that. And I say to my some people who watch me, that's why I always tell people, when you ask me what my foundation is, but what my way is, if I say a term, don't consider it as seen on TV, because I'm not a stereotypical person. Even though you could ascribe me as being a Muslim, like I said, I'm only speaking grammatically. I don't accept titles and labels. I'm speaking grammatically. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm not telling you some title or label. I'm just simply telling you what it is that I'm doing. Muslim is Arabic, which derives from the word salama. Salama means to be to have peace. Okay, so what I'm saying as a Muslim, I mean, I'm one who seeks to put myself, who's actively putting myself into a state of peace. And that state of peace is increased the more knowledge that I get. And the more knowledge that I get, the more submissive I am to the source of that knowledge, to the supreme, the most high. So as I would say, that's the outcome that happens from that. So there's my sermon for today. So here's brother Anthony Browder. Let me see if I can play it. I think, yeah, I started. Okay, it started at the right
This
spot.
show is about the movement that we see in Black America today, the response that Black people are having in society to things that are happening to them. What I wanted to ask you about is, in that, the piece about identity. As one of the major leaders who provides alternative images for Black people in terms of who they are, who are we? That's the first thing. Who are we? And what does Egypt or Kemet have to do with who we are? I'll start with those two.
Well, we are the byproduct of 400 years of an intentional effort to destroy us, to erase our memory, to separate us from the land of our ancestors, and to make us believe that we are less than we truly are. It's a miracle that we're still alive. It's a greater miracle that some of us have our minds intact and are striving to awaken brothers and sisters who are searching for the light. So that's a reality. So this movement that you're referring to is not so much a movement as it is a cyclical process. Nothing that comes stays and nothing that goes is lost. So we're in a position now where we're in the process of remembering, awakening, and then allowing ourselves to be the vessels through which our ancestors would do their best work. So these are concepts and ideas that are outside of the norm of traditional society, but these are the concepts and ideas that have maintained us, whether we are conscious of it or not, for the last 400, 500 years. Within us is a power that is stronger than our oppressor's ability to destroy us. And once we understand the source of that power and tap into that power, then we become everything that our oppressors were afraid of. And that is the mission.
What would you say to someone?
Okay, I wanted to give you that little clip right there.
Yeah.
How you feeling?
It's late. So
Yeah,
probably going to wrap up soon.
Yes, indeed. We'll be wrapping it up here soon. I wanted to try to present to the viewers, if they happen to have any questions they want to present to you or whatnot. Go ahead and put them in the chat. If you got any questions, put your questions in the chat. Close that there. Also, I will put this link in the chat. This is just to give the brother an opportunity. We have literally under 30 minutes remaining for potential time. But how do you feel about what that little clip from brother Tony?
Yeah, I really like Anthony Brada. I like all of his work. I think he plays a very important role. I think there's when it comes to the work he does, I feel like there's definitely more of he takes a more holistic approach. I very much just approach it from a historical perspective. You probably noticed that from my channel. I don't do any attachment to trying to, I guess, resurrect belief systems and systems of understanding, the ontological side. I don't really cover it that much. I'm just more concerned with connecting us to our history. So I think people like him play a really important role for those people who do want to understand actually on a practical everyday level, and connect maybe with the actual thought processes and understandings, lifestyle of the ancient Egyptians and of African societies, Nile Valley civilization as he calls it. I think he does a really good job kind of connecting several dots in areas that I don't touch. So yeah, really like him.
Yes indeed. That's solid. I want to ask you, I've got a question of my own, although I've had questions all throughout the live, but the question that I have is, what does unity look like to you? And let me explain why I'm saying that. Is because, when I say unity of a people, it takes on different understandings from person to person that I say this to. And as a result, some people will hear a certain thing and present a defeatist response. And then some people will have like a more of a like a holistic response. So what does unity look like to you?
I think I've got a different perception of unity than a lot of people do, because I kind of, in many ways, it goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. I feel like we're coming from a place historically where 50 years ago, for instance, there was very little exploration into our history, and therefore unifying as a black people was easier because we weren't really fighting a fight against a historical establishment or trying to establish ourselves historically. We're just trying to establish ourselves in real time. And so you had that kind of whole Pan-African movement, which at the time I think was very relevant, and we needed that then. But I feel like now, with our access to information, that there needs to be a little bit of a breaking apart before there's unity. And what I mean is that it's gotta happen. We're seeing it happen, where people are understanding all of these nuance when it comes to where black people come from. Because the reality of it is that the term black is probably the most simplistic label that there is.
Yes.
In that we have the most genetic diversity, we have the most phenotypic diversity, and we have the most historical diversity of any people on the planet. And yet this is very much idealistic that we're all going to just unify under this umbrella before some exploration has taken place. So I feel like there needs to be a bit of a stripping back and a bit of an uncovering of who we are as a people, the various places we came from, and acceptance of our very different and divergent origins as a people, because that's what we're going to discover. We are going to discover we're from different places. And once we respect that, I think our unity will be stronger. So I do think unity is really important, but it's got to mean shaking off also some of those things that we've taken comfort in before, because maybe they're not that healthy.
So basically, like okay, you know, like in Americas, you know, there have been for some time, you know, especially back in the 80s and 70s, to create like an umbrella code, you know, like or concept where black and proud, you know, so the label black was spreading across. Then you know, like you said, when you have all these different, I call them factions. When we break up into different factions because we embrace a certain banner, so to speak, you know, we're waving our own flag. So does that mean, you know, because if what I'm thinking of is the recipe for unity. What I want to say, the way we identify ourselves, our identity, because these labels, we and I'm not saying that the labels don't belong per se, that we use to define our identity, becoming really if I look at it, the only hindrance, or the maybe not the only, but the like a forefront hindrance that we would have in any real concept of unity. And let me explain what I'm talking about when I'm saying this. You know, if you think about the European Union, right, which is a unified nation of people, and within that nation is predominantly, a common type of people, but it's housing diversity of a sort. You understand? But the people, what I'm more getting at is the power structure itself is an agreement upon all the elements that are within that power structure to be in one accord. Here, when it comes to us as a people trying to empower ourselves, the stumbling blocks are always these minuscule objects that we put in the way of our own self, not that somebody else puts. These obstacles aren't even obstacles that were thrown at us by an adversary, but they're obstacles that, because of our infatuation of our journey, we it's like stopping upon a road and you see an orange tree. Oh, I like oranges. So do I. Then finally you go over there to the orange tree. You keep on walking, keep on walking. Oh, there's the pear tree. We like pears. You go over to the pear tree, and then here, there's pears over here. No, we like oranges. Keep on walking, keep on walking. There's the apple tree. Well, we used to always eat apple trees. Why go back to apple? I don't like apple trees. I only like oranges. I only like pears. And this be our problem. I hope you understood I do that a lot, these metaphors.
Yeah.
But that's the suffering that we are experiencing right now, when the enemy that's chasing us on this path doesn't care if you like pears, oranges, or apples. They want you. They want to have you a similar outcome with all of you.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, but it doesn't. I guess in many ways, it doesn't progress us past the fact that the whole idea of us unifying. This is going to sound controversial, but I'll say it straight. The whole idea of us unifying behind the term black is because that label was placed upon us. So people have to remember that. That's why we unify behind that term, because that label was placed upon us. Before that label was placed upon us, we never defined ourselves as that. If you go to Nigeria, where I'm from, the term black is entirely irrelevant
Yes.
because everyone's black when you get there. So
Right.
no one
Right.
uses it, you know. It's entirely irrelevant, but people do find lots of cause to differentiate in Nigeria. You know, Nigeria is more linguistically, ethnically, genotypically, phenotypically, and religiously diverse than all of Europe.
Mhm.
Than all of Europe by several factors. There's more languages, there's more religions, there's more ethnicities, there's more everything in Nigeria, and that's one small quote unquote nation. You know, that's one small nation, and that's a microcosm of what Africa is. And then Africa is a microcosm of what global black presence is. And then you want all of these people to just instantly forget all of these differences and just unify under a single term. The fact that we've been able to do that historically is a massive, massive achievement. And we must give ourselves credit for this.
Yes.
Because no other people have been able to, no other oppressed people have been able to do that. You know, to
Bounce
say, you
back
know what,
like that.
yeah, we're black and we're gonna, the fact that we are, I think black people are incredibly good at unity. We're incredibly good at it. We're better at it than any other people. People say, oh, we're so divided. It's like, no, we're not.
I think
we're not any way as divided as we should be. If you consider the fact that there's like 90 languages spoken in Nigeria, we're actually really unified, considering
Yes.
how we've been shoved together and how different we are. You know,
Would
and
you
the
agree
same goes for
that
Black Americans.
if you know, like, okay, let's take like in like China has some grades of diversity, but it is a country that for the most part is unified within itself, all of its elements
They don't have
for
any
the most,
diversity.
but it doesn't
They
have
don't.
any major diversity. But
They don't have any
what I
diversity. They've got 2 languages.
so
They got one
it's more
script, 2 languages.
monolithic. It's more like it's more
Yeah,
monolithic. But
yeah.
in the case of Africa, right? Well, that's what I was getting at. The China is like a monolithic country, but in the case of Africa, what could I say that a unified Africa, if Africa was clearly, plainly unified, where all the world would see, and I'm not talking about in some superficial sense. I'm talking about even at the roots, like economically, where you know, trade is going on and currency is going on and on, et cetera, et cetera. Would that be the ingredient that would affect quote unquote blacks all over the world? Would that have a domino effect? Would that have like a
I think economic progress always has a positive effect, even if it's just maybe not all nations improving at the same time. Maybe sometimes it takes a leading nation. For a long time, Black Americans have been that leading nation for the rest, for other black people to follow, you know? So sometimes it takes a leader to establish themselves and to, you know, I think I'm always going to be appreciative of Black America for the person that I've become. You know, I grew up in, you know, obviously I grew up in the 90s watching Spike Lee movies, and they shaped me into the character that I am. Spike Lee's my guy. If I could meet, he'd be like my top 5 bucket list must meet this person. You know, he's my guy. So and obviously you can see Tupac's another one of my guys. He's on my logo. So there's a lot of
I was going to ask you about that logo.
Yeah, it offends a lot of people, and I don't care. I've said it before. I don't care if it offends you. Like, that's literally like he shaped a lot of my personality, a lot of who I've become, a lot of that militant nature that you can see that I have. Although I might sit here but I've got a very militant side to me, and a lot of that comes from what I saw as the unapologetic, you know, blackness of Tupac. You know, unapologetic blackness that I always found very, very inspiring and admirable. And And I'm not ashamed to say that I cried the other day that he got shot. So, you know, because he was my guy. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? So, you know, this is real. So that's why I have him as my logo. I've always
what's in the
respected him and I
name?
always will.
What's in the name? The King's Monologue. When you were creating the channel, said, what should I name this? Butterscotch Cheese Channel. Collard
What
Greens.
does it say to you? What does it say to you?
The King's Monologue. Well, you know, a monologue is a discussion. So in this case, it kind of it puts to my mind, and this is my what I'm hearing, you know, where royalty comes to gather together to talk, to break bread.
Yeah.
And the particular
Essentially,
royalty
yeah.
that we're talking about is from amongst the people, from amongst the family.
Yeah. And if you look at my tagline, it actually just gives you a clue. When I started the channel, my channel was just going to be a place where I was just going to basically rant, put a video up, and then rant about it for 5 minutes straight. And there's no better word for a long rant than a monologue, you know. So I called it the King's Monologue. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to let people hear my rants. But as you can see, my political leaning has always been unapologetic blackness. I'm not going to apologize for my perspectives. I'm not going to apologize for my research, and I'm not going to. I think going back to the whole Tupac thing, one thing I liked about Tupac is you never saw him acquiesce or place himself below the powers that be. You know, you never see him kind of like, you know, you see those people and they kind of have that kind of bowy, bootlicky kind of thing. Even when it's true, even when they're the most powerful people, you can just see them. You know, they can't help. Yeah, tuck their neck in as they go, and you know, it's like, wait a second, you're supposed to be the president. Why are you bowing your head for? What the heck, man? So that's one thing I never saw in Tupac. When Tupac walked into a room, a space, wherever he was, he's the king. I
want to do the same thing here. I'm just kind of curious. I'm going to share. This is my channel right here. So you see the logo. What do you see? What does that mean to you?
I was looking at it earlier, actually, trying to figure that out. I could see a path leading to an eye. That's how I see it. That's how I'm.
That's the first time anybody has said it that correct on the first try, because that's exactly. I'm gonna just say it like this: the logo is okay. It's kind of a shout out to an ancestral emblem, you know, the eye of Asar, right? But it's my own doing, and not only that, like you said, it's. Let me share it this way. Okay, I had a dream, and in that dream, I was like, I was walking by. I saw like a preacher preaching, and he was drinking. He had a wine bottle in his hand, and I thought about how despicable that was. How is he going to be preaching? He's got a wine bottle in his hand, but he tossed me the bottle, and I catch the bottle. I'm like, what? So I keep on going. I end up getting on the bus. I look on the bus, and I'm the only one on the bus besides the driver. We start driving. I see as we're driving, the road starts to turn and wind and turn and wind. And he's like, it's going to be a rough ride ahead, right? So I'm like, what does he mean by that? It's going to be a rough ride ahead. But this was the journey that I was upon. So you're right. It's a path to insight, a journey to the insight, and the insight is observable by the truer observer in you or in us or in any one that observes. And so it's for me, it symbolizes a humbled approach as opposed to an arrogant approach, a humbled approach to pursuing knowledge. And I'm not talking about necessarily scholastic knowledge. I'm talking about knowledge of being, knowledge of purpose, knowledge of, you know, why at all, anything, you know. Even just last night, I'm sitting there for a whole night before I could even go to sleep, thinking about the transition of life, of this life as we know it, through death and then going. I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I will have to experience this. What does it mean? You know, we talk about it. You go to any mosque and church or anywhere, and somebody's got something to say. I said, but I'm just imagining myself going through this transition where there's no turning back. Like you can't, like, you're gonna die. No, I don't want to die. I insist that I don't die. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Right. Off you go. Come on. So that's what, in short, that's what Soul Journey of Life means. The light dome is actually what I call the center that you're talking about there. Imagine if you got to the point where you meet that light. For me, it's like, imagine going to like a place, an abode, or even a structure like a dome, like that's heavenly, opened up to the universe being the dome. And where you're sitting with brothers like yourself, like myself, people that we think we disagree with, but we really don't, because they just don't speak the language that we're speaking, even if they're speaking British and American English. They're just not talking this way. So we think like, oh, well, you're not one of us. Well, the next thing you know, you see him in the same building, and the title of the building is "He's one of you." That's the element of that. And that's you know what I get out of that. Anyway, let me go back to this. I wanted to share. This is our brother's YouTube page. Be sure to visit his page, like, share, and subscribe. Click the notification bell on his page. You know, as he says, he puts in a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of intelligence goes into it. And stay tuned for, you know, whatever he's got coming up next. And what is that?
Okay. I posted a short today, which was about how Zahi Hawass manipulated the results. Well, manipulated how he measured King Tut's skull, so it would appear to be more European. That's it there, than it actually is. So that's what I posted today. As you can see, wearing the same garments. Recorded and posted today. Then the reason that I had that video ready is because some of the data that I presented in that short, I'm doing a longer video, which I think might be ready by tomorrow. I've been working on it for, I can't tell you how long, but essentially it's called The Africanity of Tutankhamun. And it's going to be, in my view, the definitive discussion ender when it comes to what race was Tutankhamun. Because actually, I think out of all of the characters in ancient Egypt, because his tomb was found intact, we have the most evidence that he was a young African Nilotic boy. We have so much evidence, it's unbelievable. And I don't think I've ever put, hard facts, exactly. I don't think anyone's ever just put it together and just said, how African was he? And that's literally what the video is going to be called, something along those lines. I haven't decided exactly what the title will be, but that will be dropping tomorrow. That'll be a mini documentary
right
about
there in that casket right there.
I mean, yes, that's a dolichocephalic head. Zahi Hawass, watch that short when you get a chance. But Zahi Hawass has tried to claim that head is brachycephalic, which is the European head shape, the flat back head. He's said, oh, it's you know, this is the type of thing that Eurocentrists do. You know, they'll tell you your eyes are lying to you. It's like, we're not dumb and we're not stupid. Like, Tutankhamun is literally got the most famous long head in the history of any characters that we've ever come across. Yes. If there's one thing he was to say to anyone in public, say, tell me something about Tutankhamun's skull, they say, oh, it's really long. Yet Zahi Hawass thought he would get away with telling us, no, he's got a short skull. It might look long, but we've measured it and it's short. This is the kind of arrogance and stupid things that they do.
Tricks. AI.
Yeah, so he's basically, he tilts it literally like 45 degrees and then measures from the top of the forehead to the base of the neck and says that's the length of his skull, as opposed to the front of his head to the back of his head, like you're supposed to measure.
But what makes them so what makes them so desperate to need these elements in their story? Why are they so
because he's a despicable character, and he's brachycephalic. He's got no back of head. He's like just flat. You know, that's what he is. So like most Turkish people, no offense, but that's kind of like a Turkish trait, that they're very brachycephalic. So he has to make, irrespective of, we can see that that's an African skull, he has to make it European somehow. You know, so this is the, so yeah, so this is what we are up against. This is what we have to constantly combat. It's not just the the weight of the media. It's also, even in this kind of realm of academia, the amount of dishonesty that came out of him as an individual, as the kind of like Minister of Antiquity for Egypt. We had 30 years of Zahi Hawass just tampering, destroying artifacts, lying on reports, like everything that you can do. The amount of damage this one man has done to the legacy of black people in Egypt is disgusting. So every opportunity I get, I try to expose anything that I can, come across that's relevant to people. I'll expose it, and I want people to know the lengths that these people go through. So yeah, got that documentary dropping hopefully tomorrow, the longer documentary. And
all right,
yeah.
Well,
and then
I want to let me play this this short real quick, because I want to make sure people definitely subscribe to your channel, as we see that they've been doing heavily throughout the year that you've been doing this. Let's see.
Of King Tutankhamun. It's an incredibly long head. In fact, it's so long that people have suggested that it might be the result of deliberate head deformation, or some people have even suggested he might have some extraterrestrial DNA. Now, in reality, neither of those things are true. On the African continent, dolichocephaly is dominant, whereas amongst Eurasians, it's incredibly rare, where most people tend to be either mesocephalic or brachycephalic, which means that their head is almost square or round. If you measure King Tutankhamun's head from front to back, you would get a consistent cephalic index of under 75%, making him overwhelmingly dolichocephalic. However, Zahi Hawass made not one but several claims that the head shape of Tutankhamun was actually brachycephalic. If you open up Zahi Hawass's book, every single image of Tutankhamun, he tilts the head forward, meaning he could take that much narrower angle for the length of his skull, being able to give him a cephalic index that was not only incorrect, it's downright criminal. This is the head of King.
Yeah. What they'll do is say, "Oh well, he had a deformity. He was deformed. It was a rare trait, a disease. Something.
Yeah, they tried all of that.
They do that.
Yeah, they tried all that. I mean, I only found that out. I mean, I bought his book. This is the book that I was quoting from. It's actually a very good book because you get images that you just won't find on the internet. It's called Scanning the Pharaohs. So this is Zahi Hawass's book. But this gave me the answer because I'd already known from the report, the ancestry and pathology of the Armana lineage. He did that report in 2010. And that's where he first reported that Tutankhamun's skull was brachycephalic with a cephalic index of 84%. So I already did a live stream kind of like saying this is rubbish. I've looked at every image of Tutankhamun, and the highest cephalic index I got was 74, but the average one I got was like 72. So he's like incredibly dolichocephalic, as you would expect, as he appears. So I was like, how is he getting that? And then obviously it's when I found the book, when I got the book, and I realized that for some reason, every time I saw Tutankhamun, his skull was tilted 45 degrees. I was like, oh, so he's been measuring from the top of his forehead to the base of his neck, and he's saying that that's the length. Like, it's so deceptive.
Got a bone to pick with you now. He's like,
I would love him. Like, here, I just want to show you a page. So this is there's about 10 of these. There's about 10 of these images where Tutankhamun's skull is tilted like that. Yes, now, anyone can, just to be very, very clear, it's very easy to know if you're orienting a skull properly. It's not like it's difficult. When you orient a skull properly, the teeth will be horizontal. Okay, as you can see, the teeth here are tilting downwards, and the zygomatic bone. Sorry, let me just quickly just open it up. And the zygomatic bone, which is the cheekbone, will be flat. Wait. Let me there. So you can see it there. If you look at the teeth, can you see how they're up at that angle? Yes. They're pointing upwards. That means his skull is pointing downwards. Okay, this is the correct angle of Tutankhamun's skull. Doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. Okay, that's the correct angle.
In short, he's playing games.
it's beyond playing games. It's actually like when I realized what he was doing, it's what actually really disgusted me. And I made a longer version of this short on TikTok. There's a 3-minute version. But what actually disgusts me more than what he's done is the fact that he knew he was going to get away with it, and the fact that no Egyptologist or anthropologist have challenged him. That's what disgusts me. Is the fact that he knew. Not only did he put it in his paper, he put it in his book, and no one challenged him. Like anthropologists knew what he was doing, and none of them said, "Wait a second, Sahi, what you're doing here?" Because he didn't do it just with his skull; he did it with
Nobody called him
KV55,
out.
which is Akhenaten. Yeah, he did it with several skulls, and then by the end of his report, he's like, "Oh well, it was now." He said basically none of the Armana mummies were dolichocephalic, apart from I think he mentioned Yuya and one more. He said two of them. I've looked through the Armana lineage. Every single one of them are dolichocephalic. So he's tilted wherever he's not wanted them to appear dolichocephalic. He's tilted the skull. This is, I mean, that's just criminal. Like that's lies. That's like it's not even. You're fabricating information. You're manipulating data for someone in his position. That should literally be like you're fired. But he didn't even get challenged.
Do you
like,
have do you ever since you've been doing this work, have you been invited to like any presentations or lectures or anywhere where they would present, give you like the platform to?
I think that will happen more now that I'm doing papers. I've got a interview with Robin Walker next week. Do you know Robin Walker?
I don't. But
he's quite a big scholar here, yeah. So he's he wrote the book.
Spell the name.
Robin Walker. So Robin Walker. So he did the book when we ruled, which actually I think is quite I think it's a bestseller in Black history. So me and him are in contact. So I've got a couple of.
Does he wear glasses?
Yeah.
Is it this guy right here? I want to make sure because I don't want to pop. I think I've got a Robin
Walker, yeah.
Imhotep.
I imagine they've been in contact. I don't know for sure. I know who Asai Imhotep. I know who Asai Imhotep is.
See if I'm correct.
So I've got an interview. Yeah, that's him. So I've got an interview with him next week. And obviously, like I mentioned earlier, Cesaro Marias, who's like a leading Egyptological reconstruction artist. I was always under the impression that I was influencing his work since last year, and I made that. I was glad I was open with that, because as soon as I suspected it, I made a video live stream about it, and I was like, this guy's watching my reconstructions, because every time I do something, he releases something new. And I think a lot of people presumed I was being a bit arrogant there, thinking, no, he's not. But then obviously when I did my critique of his Amenhotep III reconstruction, he was on every live stream that I did. He was in my... So clearly the work I'm doing on my little YouTube channel is upsetting the industry quite a bit, which I love to see. There's also a new reconstruction artist out now called Dina Depina. I don't know if you've seen her work. I did a live stream showcasing her work. It was my last live stream. She is amazing. Like she's like the best. Dina Depina. I think her YouTube channel is called. Try typing in DINADEPINA. You should find her. I think her channel might be called
EINA?
No, Dina Depina. Dina Depina. She's really, really good. So she's a breath of fresh air, because her reconstructions are actually just they're just really good. I can't explain how good they are. You have to just see them and you realize how good she is. So she actually is really alleviating a lot of pressure from me. I haven't had to do a reconstruction. I haven't had to do. Let me see if I can find the actual name of her channel. I'll try and make it easier for you. So it'll take me long.
Yeah, you can share. You could. I think you could share it from your end. try to anyway.
She done anything recently? Because then it will show up to me. Wait, make sure I've got the right name. Nydia. Maybe she's called Nydia Senegal now, because that's her name on Instagram. Once again. Nydia Senegal. Dina Depina, yeah. So if you type in Dina space Depina, Depina, you should find her channel. And she's really, really talented reconstruction artist. Super talented. Let me actually see if I can.
This is who you have. This is what came up anyway. How about that?
Yes, that's her. That's her. So look at her reconstructions. They are absolutely brilliant.
Wow, that's pretty
So
good.
she's yeah, she's really good. So what I love is the fact that hopefully there's a bit of, we can get more people like her doing this important work. Because I feel like the lies that they've spent so many years safeguarding, bottlenecking, keeping us restricted from. I feel like that house of cards is definitely coming down. And it was inevitable once it became possible to share the imagery and the information. It was going to become inevitable that people were going to realize who the ancient Egyptians were. And, this is just, as far as I'm concerned, a catalyst for something that's going to happen inevitably anyway. I think that Zai Hawass and Co are fighting a losing battle.
The truth shall be revealed, as they say.
Yeah, it shall be, absolutely.
Well, brother, I want to ask you if you have any recommended readings or viewings or anything of that sort.
Well, I've given my recommended viewings. Readings, I would say if it's ancient Egypt, no better place to start than the great Sheikh Anta Diop himself.
Yes.
But there's other areas of history that I'm sure you'll be into. It all depends your approach as well, because like I said, I'm like, at least I like to think so. My approach, I like to be like Sheikh Anta Diop and just be kind of like very academic about my pursuit, and then about basically exposing the Africanity of the ancient Egyptian civilization. That's actually one of my favorite things to do. To not only, it's not even about the fact that they're black. I like to expose how African they are and how regional they are, in terms of they act very much like the people who inhabit the Nile Valley to this day, and other Africans as well. Like it's not just a case of, oh, the ancient Egyptians were black, but they act like Greek people. No, the ancient Egyptians were black and they were African in everything they did. In fact, they were so African and so unlike people from the Levant and the Middle East. They're nothing like them. They're nothing like the Europeans. They were as African a civil. Like if you're going to get all of the kind of, if you're going to get African culture and build an advanced civilization around it, you would end up with ancient Egypt.
Yes.
That's what you'd end up
Have
with.
You read
it's like a culmination of African everything.
Have you read the book Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams?
I've actually got 2 copies of that book by chance.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. I bought it once, and then I bought it again, forgetting that I had already had it. So I've got
like
2
2 look better on my shelf than 1. I need 2 of these on the shelf.
I've got 2.
Let's see here. I've got a closing question here. These are kind of I'm an abstract type of person. The one question is, if you could wake up tomorrow with any kind of ability, no matter how far-fetched it might be, what would you wake up? What would happen? What would we see tomorrow?
Oh no, let me give you a PC answer. Yeah, let me give you a PC answer. Okay, I would. It would be to do with liberation. Put it that way. It'd be to do with liberation. By the end of it, there'll be equilibrium. that's all I could say.
So
Yeah.
then the other question, the next question is, if you if there was one thing, like let's say you were
I got an answer to the first question actually.
Okay.
So my ability would be to at a whim destroy any weapon that I chose.
Wow, that's yeah, okay. All right.
That would be it. That would level the playing fields.
Right, it would. That would change the whole a lot of big talking entities would not be big talking anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Just on that note by itself. So if there was one thing that tomorrow, if you wake up, this all of the melanated people in the world could just suddenly this boom, their conditions are like what? Yeah, no, these are like, wild
Yeah.
Wild questions.
Yeah. See, I don't know. Because I think Americans give you that very useful quote, and as an African, I totally agree that not all skin folk are kinfolk.
Right.
So I don't know if I'd do I don't know if I'd be that.
Like one sweet.
Yeah, because some of those people might be the ones who put us back in chains again. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't know. I think I'd be very careful with it. Yeah, I think I'd be very careful with it, because sometimes it's the people that you trust will be the first ones who will put us back to where we started.
You have any children? Well,
yes, I do.
You do.
Yeah.
Let's say you were getting ready to go on a long journey. You don't know when you're coming back home. You got to get down on one knee and look your child in the eye, and just one most important. You only get one most important thing to say to her. To your as a son, right?
I got 3 kids.
Oh yeah. Well,
so I got sons and I got
sons and daughters. Well, who's the oldest? The son or the daughters?
Son.
The son. So you're down on one knee. My son, I got this one thing I need to tell you. Should I not return, as I would like to return? What would that one thing be?
I think I don't know, that's a very, very, very deep question, by the way.
Yeah, that's how I like it.
I think the only thing that this is my piece of advice is that the only thing that you regret in life is regret. So don't always, wherever possible, always fulfill what you can, because I think regret is the only thing that you regret not doing. The only time you look back and you think, is when you haven't done something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, dear brother, that was the third and last question out of the wild questions I just gave you.
Thank you, sir.
If there's anything you would like to say to the community, or anything like links or supports or whatever, here's the floor is yours.
Well, I'll just thank you for having me on the channel and your network, and the King's Monologue. I think I'm in a fortunate position in that I'm relatively findable now. It took a little while. I feel like I was being suppressed for a bit, but yeah, I'm relatively findable. So if you kind of search that term, you can find me on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. That's it, really. Don't use X or Facebook really. So that's it. So yeah, find me. Message me if you want. Subscribe. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed the chat with you.
By the way, right here, what I'm showing you is my website. This is Soul Journey of Life, the website. Why I'm showing you this is because I'm encouraging the community that any of us, if we have any kind of groups or any type of intentions or desires to organize ourselves and have certain discussions from amongst ourselves, this is the platform for that purpose, for which you can oh, no wonder I'm not even on the page, for which you can do that. And hold on, because I was trying to do something here and I'm not able to do it. Why can't I do it? I think because my clicker, the battery has died, so I can't click. My clicker stopped clicking. But what I was getting at here, there we go, is that let me show you the home page. It's not designed for like massive, like the whole world. It's designed for us to be able to have our own environment where you can, if you want to establish groups or teaching a teaching source where you can create a group or a page or forums or whatnot to teach, to share, to break bread, your own thing, your own little whatever. This is the environment to do it. Sojourning Life, a conscious people's social media. So whatever your intellectual perspectives are, this is the platform. My whole purpose of designing this platform is to give us a room, a space away from a lot of the riffraff, where we can break bread amongst each other as a group, as an individual, video chat, conference chat, all the fundamental social media ingredients, are housed Sojourning of Life. So there's that. And I definitely, welcome you to, join, participate. Maybe you could create, something that would invite people to, like a study of a sort. So anyway, I definitely appreciate you coming on, taking the time out of your day. I know we pushed the clock on you. I know it's probably tomorrow for you. Where
It is,
in London, it's already, the sun's about to rise any time now. But I appreciate you pushing through and dropping some profound knowledge upon us. Brothers and sisters, be sure to go and check out his channel. Very, very, very informative for us, and I think it's just one additional tool in our arsenal, in our battle to stand up on our own two legs as a people. For me, unity will be amongst the people who desire to be unified in the first place. And that's at the end of the day. If it's in your heart, you're going to be at the dinner table when it's time to eat. So yeah, my allegories, I've got hundreds of them. Dear brother, peace and blessings, and I appreciate you for coming aboard. You have a blessed rest of your day, your night, day, night, whatever.
You too, man. Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed.
Cheers.
So
Take
next
care.
time yep.
So.
No, I was just going to say that you're welcome to build and break bread anytime you see me live or whatever. If you see the link in the chat or whatever, come on in. We can break bread. Maybe I might be talking, because I talk about, my main core is about the people, about the melanated community. But what ways will improve us intellectually? What ways will drive us forward intellectually? I love to build intellectually. But you're welcome to come, So, there's that open invitation. And now I can say, peace be with you. Have a blessed rest of your night.
Thank you, brother. Take care, man. Thank you.
Take
Cheers.
care. All right, dear family, that is all that I could offer you for tonight. We pushed past almost 3.5 hours. Since I did this a little earlier this time, I'm not as worn out, but all the same, I pray that this will be something, just another element that will benefit the community, and it will be useful, because that's what this is all about for me, is providing something. That's why, if you don't see me live often, I like to, when I do come live, I like to come when I have something that I believe in my heart is useful to us as a people. I don't want to waste your time and your viewing experience in vain, because sometimes we sit here watching clip after clip, TikTok after TikTok, IG after IG, just spending all the time watching, meaningless viewing. But some of us, we really want to get it together. You understand? We really want to, make sense out of all this. And I think that when we break bread with those of us who endeavor upon, focused learning, I think it benefits all of us. And the more we become aware of one another, the more we can, it makes it easier for us to tap in, for that purpose. It makes it easier for us to tap in and learn. To be honest with you, there should be institutions, there should be, organized universities and whatnot erecting from us for this purpose, where brothers and sisters, like the brother that is with us today, where we could benefit from. Our work should be canonized. It should be, readily available to lift up our children, because this is what our children should inherit. I mentioned, I was talking in a previous live. I said, what do you have for your legacy? This brother has a legacy. He has something that each of his 3 children can inherit from him, where they will literally remember their father. It's impossible for them not to be able to remember the father with as much work as he's putting forward. They will have something to carry on for generations to come. They'll be saying, our father taught us this, and here now I'm teaching you, like that. And that's really how we start to heal as a community, when we start to be able to pass down valuable knowledge to our descendants that we've inherited from our ancestors and our colleagues of our day. So there's that. We could do it. I believe in us. Like I said, those of us in whose hearts is a desire for unity, we're going to get it. We're going to be where we need to be, and amongst who we need to be amongst. It's just like that. And no matter how hard the fight or struggle to do it becomes, when you have something in your heart, if it's across the Atlantic, you're going to be going across the Atlantic. How do I know? Well, I had someone in my heart, and I crossed the Atlantic for the purpose of reestablishing not only my roots, but as my mother would put it, my royal oats. Anyway, I'm having some fun with you. This is your brother Abdul Wadud, aka Questman. This was another live Soul Journey of Life, Conscious Black Social Media. Dear brothers and sisters, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you do a small favor, after snapping out of it, be sure to donate right here. CashAPP TheLightDome, and show your support to the platform is really appreciated, because it helps to make all of these things even more possible. Yes, indeed, dear family. Salam alaikum, shalom, hotep, peace and blessings be with you, and have a blessed rest of your time.
Light